All right, let's get started. Good evening and welcome to the Ogden City Council meeting of August 29th, 2017. This is the 5:50 p.m. Board of Canvassing meeting. Please note that all council members are present at this time, and I'm going to turn the time over quickly to Vice Chair Heyer to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, Chair White, we've asked Councilmember Nadolski if he would lead us tonight.
Thank you. Please rise.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please take a moment of silence with me. Thank you. So next on our agenda is the 2017 municipal primary election. Tracy, are you going to do that? Thank you. I was looking for you to introduce her, but that I will bring Tracy up here.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Before us tonight is the official results for the 2017 primary election. The seats that were to be voted upon in this election was Council Member for Municipal Ward 1, 3, At-Large A, and At-Large B. Just briefly to show previous voter turnout, we had a 21.7% voter turnout for this primary, which is quite a bit higher than we've had in previous, even over mayoral elections. So we were really pleased with that, even though I think there's still a long ways to go. 21% of the people making decisions for our city, I'd like to see a bigger turnout. So we're going to work a little bit next year on helping people understand why it's important to vote in a municipal election. But we need to do that in an off year, so it doesn't sound like we're promoting anything in particular. So, to get on with the official results, this is a report. It's a clip from a report which has been provided to you with the official results. We received 5,463 were the number of votes cast. There were 6 provisional ballots, which is quite a small number compared to previous years. Only one of those was not counted as the person was not registered or did not complete all the necessary things they needed to do to be registered. So the ballot was rejected. There was 108 votes by machine. Everybody else turned in a vote by mail ballot. Of the ballots that we received by mail, 89 were not counted for different reasons. As you see, they returned it after the deadline. There was no signature, or they didn't sign it. It was signed by somebody else, or the signature didn't match their voter record. So those are the reasons that they wouldn't be counted. So these are the official results in the At-Large A, B, and Municipal Ward 3 seats. Municipal Ward 1 did not have a primary. The top 2 candidates in each seat will move to the general election and would be considered nominated if the board chooses to certify the results. One of our things I wanted to mention is our partnership with Weber County. We're grateful for all the hard work that they do. We worked with them and other cities to do a combined election notice, which is required in the paper, but it saves significant amount of money for us. Which the ads are some of the largest expenses that we have. We had a lower call volume than in previous years, but the questions that we did get asked most is, where can I find candidate information? And we encourage candidates, again, to fill out the online biography with the state at it's included in the candidate guideline, the candidate guide, sorry. But that biography, that's where we refer people to. That's how they know how to get information about the candidates. Another one was, where can I drop off my ballot? There were 18 locations for drop-offs in the county. Ours, we have one in our parking lot. It's 24-hour drop-off, and you can just drive up to it. They don't even have to get out of their car. And the other one was lots of calls about illegally placed campaign signs. So that was a big issue for us. And those signs are picked up and thrown away. They're not returned. So candidates might want to refer to their candidate guide about that.
Is there a list of where those drop-off places are? Is that on the website?
It is. It will be on our website once we
Okay.
gear up for the general election. We'll have that posted there, but it is also on the county site.
Okay.
So, if there are any other questions, if not, we would request that you certify the results as provided to you this evening.
And you can drop them off at any location and it will get back? It
Yes.
doesn't matter if it's in Far West or anything like that?
Any place in Weber County. And that's the same thing with the polling locations on Election Day. There's 8 across the county. Anybody from Weber County could vote at any of those 8
And is there
locations.
an attempt to get a hold of the people that maybe their signatures didn't match?
Yes, the county contacts them through email, letter, and phone call, telling them what it is that they need to remedy, how they can do that. My understanding is they're contacted at least 3 times. So plenty of opportunity for them to fix those issues.
And one other quick question. How much does it cost to send out a ballot, or about how much do you think it costs?
With all the printing and that type of thing, I don't know specifically, but regular postage applies, of course. And depending on how many ballots there are, or if there's other ballot issues from other districts, those costs are split up. So I can find out exactly if you'd like for next time. Okay.
Any other questions for Tracy Hansen?
I have a question, if you mind. Do you know what our voter turnout is like relative to nearby communities?
It seems that the county put out numbers about a week before the election, and at that time Ogden was at 10%, South Ogden was at 18%. We were by far the lowest, but I don't know what the final came out to be.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. And then we have reports from administration.
We need to make the motion on this first. Ready for a motion?
Yeah, sure. That'd be a good idea.
I would make a motion that we certify the results that have been given to us for the August 15th, 2017 municipal primary election.
I second it.
I have a motion by Vice Chair Heyer, second by Councilmember Garner, to certify the election results. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Forgot about that part. Thanks. Next, reports from the administration.
Mark Stratford, Assistant City Attorney, Chair and Mayor. Just briefly, the last item on the comments as far as illegally placed campaign signs. So congratulations to the people who have moved on to the final 2 in your ward or at-large seat. And obviously, those people want to get their name out as much as possible. And sometimes in the desire to get your name as prominently placed as possible, it's easy to end up putting a campaign sign in a place that it shouldn't be. So we'll just do a very, very brief review of where those are not allowed. And as was previously mentioned by the city recorder, if they're in an incorrect location, they will be removed and destroyed and not returned to the candidate. And so you don't want to use your advertising resources in a way that's not going to be effective. So first of all, campaign signs are not allowed on public property. For example, this building, other property owned by Ogden City, campaign signs are not allowed there, and public property extends to the public right-of-way. And when you think about the public right-of-way, it's not just the paved street, but it is from the property line on one side of the right-of-way to the property line on the other side of the right-of-way. So 3 simple rules for the candidates to remember. If you see a sidewalk, put your sign behind the sidewalk. Don't put it between the curb and the sidewalk. That is part of the public way. Second of all, if you don't see a sidewalk and all there is a curb or the edge of the pavement, technically it should be on the property line. Sometimes it's hard to know that, so please go at least 6 feet behind whatever is there. If it's a curb, at least 6 feet behind the curb. If it's just the edge of pavement, at least 6 feet behind the edge of pavement, and you'll usually be okay as far as being outside of the public right-of-way. And then finally, if you're at a corner, there's what's called a sight triangle for safety purposes. And that is that you go to the corner and you measure back 40 feet on each side of the street and draw a line between those 2 points. That triangle is the sight triangle, which needs to be maintained for public safety so that traffic doesn't have a problem, and you should not have your signs within the sight triangle. Sometimes it can be hard to do that because you'll see landscaping or short fences or other things that are within that sight triangle, and the candidate will be tempted to go ahead and put it in there anyway, but that is not an allowed area. And so, and finally, even on private property, make sure you have permission from the property owner to put the sign up behind the sidewalk, because if they didn't give you permission, you don't have a right to be there. So good luck to everybody and happy campaigning. Any questions?
And you take them away and they
get
do what with
they get thrown away.
Discard them. Thank you.
What happens? Thank you.
And at $3.98 a sign, you don't want that to happen. All right, no action is taken on that presentation. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Before we do that, Chair White, we have some Boy Scouts in the audience that we ought to recognize before we go into our work session.
Thank you. Where did they end up?
They're over on the far side there.
Where are the Boy Scouts? You guys want to come up and introduce yourself and tell us why you're here real quick? Very rarely do we have this many people in the chamber, so you're lucky tonight.
My name is Ashton Buck Peters. This is my little brother, Marshall Craig Peters, and this is my friend. He's in Scouts. What's your middle name? What? He's Jonathan Sherman. The reason why we're here is because for a Scout requirement, we're participating and watching a city council meeting.
Is it for a badge?
Yes.
Wait, and what badge is that? You don't know.
I don't remember.
Okay. Well, welcome here. Thank you for being here.
Citizenship in the community, right?
Community?
Yes.
All right.
And the reason why we're here is because they wouldn't let us in the jail.
With that, now I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
We have a motion by Vice Chair Heyer, second by Councilmember Garner, to adjourn this session, and hopefully we won't have to see them in jail in any particular point in time. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So tonight's a unique night for us in that we are now carrying on the 6 p.m. Continuation of our work session. We had to do the Board of Canvassing so that we can certify those primary election results. I'm going to start off by saying that we are obviously conducting, I see a lot of blue out here, obviously conducting a fact-finding session on urban chickens. And we have asked 6 groups to present to us tonight about facts that they see, different organizations. And they will have about 10 minutes to, they'll all have 15 minutes. 10 minutes will go to their conversation, and we'll have 5 minutes to have questions for them, or 5 minutes, then we will move on. We will also go on to an opportunity for public input. We very rarely have public input in work sessions, so I'm just letting you know that. One of the things that we will ask of you is we will have it'll be 3 minutes. You will come up, and we will hopefully at that point have you be able to stand up in front and have a kind of a queue there so that we can hear as many people as possible. And we will also, I'm just looking through, hopefully we'll get through most of you. If not, we will have opportunities for you to put your comments on comment cards, which I think are sitting right in the back there. So please do that if you feel that that's a better way. It's sometimes very scary to get up in front of the podium. And also, we'll be cutting off comments at around 9 o'clock. So we're trying to get through as many people as possible. So just so you know that's kind of the ground rules I'm giving you tonight before we get started. And we would love to hear from as many as possible. So we were going to get started. One of the other things is the civility. We're going to try to keep civil. I know that that's sometimes hard, but this gavel's up here for a reason, so let's try not to use that. Any comments before we get started? And
I believe there's a sign-up sheet for people who want to speak. Is that correct? And where is that?
No, we're not. No, there is not. But there are comment cards in the back, correct, Brittany?
Comment cards, okay.
Okay.
All right.
A sheet in the back for people who'd like to be included on an email list specific to this topic, given that there's not a decision being made for future dialogue. There is that in the back table with the comment cards. So,
Okay.
Great, thanks. And just so you know, very rarely do we have work sessions within the chamber. So this is a little new for all of us as well. So, anyways, let's get started. I think that would be where we should start. And we have them in order. We have the Ogden City Administration, and I think the Animal Services and
Chair White?
Yes.
Actually, council staff's going to make a presentation,
Thank you.
presentation first.
I'm sorry. You probably told me that about 500 times.
thank you, Brittany. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of a brief presentation on kind of why we're here today, what the discussion is circled around. So the main question at hand is whether or not chickens should be allowed for egg production in Ogden's residential neighborhoods. And with that, just a little bit of background. This is something that has been discussed in the past with the council. Unfortunately, with our animal ordinances, we've learned it's not always a simple yes or no decision. There's a lot of policy involved in either decision with enforcement or regulation, so there's a lot with that. And the council has a lot to weigh. There's a lot of perspectives and facts, and we appreciate everyone that's here today to provide that information to us. And the more information provided, the better informed the decisions can be for the council. So a little bit of history. In 2009, there was a petition that went before the Planning Commission, and it was reviewed, and it came to the council with a 5-2 vote recommending denial. So there wasn't an actual ordinance drafted for that. The City Council considered based on the parameters that were included in the petition and chose not to move forward with that initial proposal, and so that was ultimately not successful, but there was public input as part of that process. In 2010, because of the 2009 petition, the City Council wanted to put it to a vote. So there was a consideration that occurred during a City Council meeting. It went back to the Planning Commission with an ordinance that was drafted at the council's request. and came back to the council with a 5-2 vote recommending denial. And under council consideration, there was a 3-4 vote. Once again, public input received on that. So in 2012, the council held a work session discussion to determine whether or not they wanted to again look into chickens, and the determination at that time was not to further pursue that. And here we are today to look at this issue and to gather additional facts and input. So under the prior consideration, there were a lot of things that were considered, lot sizes, a lot of things related to planning, obviously some of the benefits that are related to owning chickens, maybe some of the challenges, and so just a lot of different things that were taken into consideration in the first discussion for chickens. This is just a brief benchmark. I pulled in some of our neighboring communities and also some of the cities that have Ogden's form of government, and just to show a little bit of a variety with what some of the different cities do that are comparable to Ogden with our form of government, but then also our neighbors. And so it does kind of go all across the table with how that works in different cities. And so we have received, and thanks to y'all in the room here today, a lot of correspondence relative to chickens. So in the last, since January 2016 and till today at noon, these numbers are pretty current, we've received 141 emails, letters, social media posts, different phone calls, and 62 of those were unique senders. And for the most part, the majority were in favor of chickens. There were some that had expressed that they were not in favor, and then a couple that really were just interested in the topic and didn't have a decision made at this point where they stood on that. So we also did, over the past week, a Facebook poll and then a poll on our website. And so with that, just kind of broke down some of the information there with the respondents. One thing to note with both of these, we did have about 50 people that had taken both of the polls, and the numbers were consistent with it. It was 47 in support of, and then 3 against for both of those. So
wait, so 180 people from Ogden. I'm trying to see how many of those
that participated in that were in favor. So the total, and I'd have
a response rate of over 600 or about 600 on all responses.
Mm-hmm. And then the total for Ogden was a little bit over 200.
Thanks.
So yeah, no problem. So there was a lot of interest outside of the city as well. And then with the website poll, that actually was mostly the Ogden residents on that. So that kind of shows some of the information. And then there were a few that responded yes that weren't residents, because the no's and the undecideds were the same on both of those.
On those polls, was this something that you made an effort to make each response from a unique person?
Yes, definitely. So
How's that done?
And so as part of the website poll, we used a tool called Jot Forms, and so you can actually look at the IP addresses. We had asked for some specific information, name, email addresses, zip code, and city, and then with the Facebook actually went in and kind of dug through some data to get that information.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And so this is just kind of, I guess, to sum up why we're here today. But with these fact-finding work sessions, we're here to learn about chickens from some of our resident experts. And so there's a lot of great information within the community. A couple of people are a little bit outside of the community that have come today, but really some great information from some experts. And then to gather those facts and information, to get that public input, and then for you as a council to have that opportunity to determine how best to proceed based on the feedback received. So that's in sum what we're here today for, and looking forward to the dialogue, definitely. Thank you.
Amy?
I think we need to acknowledge all the work that she's put in. She's put in a lot of hours receiving information, looking up data, and so thank you for all the time you spent.
Oh, absolutely. And we, our staff all helped me. It wasn't just me by any means, so. I'll get that next presentation up for me so that.
Chair, our 3 presenters will be Chief Young, Jared Johnson, and Greg Montgomery.
Thank you.
Might want to mention that timer.
Council Chair White, Vice Chair Heyer, thanks for having me here tonight. I'm here to present on behalf of Ogden Animal Services on the our view, or the best guesstimate we can give on how urban chickens would impact our functions in the Animal Services Department, which is housed in the Ogden City Police Department. It's clicker, Amy. Sorry. Just enter. Okay. So currently there is an ordinance in place prohibiting chickens with a slight exception to that ordinance. So we really don't have chickens in Ogden. So the current code as it lies is actually in code enforcement code to be enforced. But because it's a animal services problem, it's been a partnership between the animal services and code enforcement to enforce chicken complaints where there's been chicken coops brought in that didn't belong in the city, or there's been complaints regarding those that are in the conform or non-conforming zones inside Ogden City. Our animal service department receives an average of 2 calls a week from individuals inquiring about whether they can have chickens inside of Ogden City, and they receive kind of a steady uptick of calls regarding chickens in the city lately. So some more of those, or a larger portion of that work, has actually kind of been pushed towards code enforcement recently because animal services didn't have the resources to handle the complaints on the chickens.
Sorry, Chief, how many of those were complaints?
It's just an average of about 2 calls a week right now regarding chickens.
Where are those complaints?
Complaints and people asking questions about whether they can have chickens.
Oh, whether if they can have chickens. Okay.
Yes. We kind of broke down what we felt our expenditure of resources would be if we were to allow chickens inside the city. The average cost for an animal service officer with their fringe benefit package is about $21 an hour. We're guessing we'd have to put about 20 hours a week into inspections of people making an application for new coops inside the city. About 20 hours a week into investigations of noise and complaints regarding the chickens, and at least 10 hours a week into complaints just regarding the other animals that may come out of having chickens in the city, which would include mice, skunks, rats, and raccoons, which we already deal with in large numbers inside the city as it is. So adding all those up, we're looking at about $1,050 a week in extra resources, $4,200 a month, and upwards of $50,000 annually just is our estimate of what we'd have to expend just on personnel costs and dealing with the chicken issues. And just as to give an idea of how busy our animal service department is, we have 4 full-time officers and our supervisor, Chad Everett, who's here with us tonight. He'll come up when we answer or do the question portion of this. We had 2,697 complaints we handled in 2014. That was up from 1,854 in 2013, just to kind of show you what the trend is. These are dealing with our current animal complaints without bringing the chickens into it. This is stray dogs, unlicensed dogs, dog bites, cats, dead animals in the roadway, all the different things that we deal with. We're confident it would take at least one other full-time position in animal services to deal with the additional chicken ordinance, just to do the inspections, to handle the complaints, and handle the other side complaints that would come from that.
So this nearly 2,700 complaints is what you're receiving today, not anything to do with the chickens?
No, this is just to give you an idea of what our trend has been from 2013 to 2014. You're looking at about an 800 complaint, more or less, increase just from one year to another that those 4 officers are handling. And those are just call-in complaints. These aren't self-initiated activities of things they're going out and finding, or activities they're doing like licensing fairs and neuter fairs and all these different activities. This is just complaints they're receiving from the public of issues they have to deal with.
Is that data fiscal year or calendar year?
We track our calendar year.
Calendar year. So do you have data for 15, 16?
We didn't have updated data, so we didn't include that. I just wanted to show the trend line. We switched our RMS systems in that period of time, so I didn't want to present what I wasn't sure was the accurate data. We're working on that. But that will be something we'll provide as soon as we get it.
Approximately how much increase did you anticipate then? That you mentioned a moment ago that if we add the chickens, you anticipate
Yeah, we're just kind of gauging on, there's a large amount of interest. They get a lot of phone calls as far as interest in coops, and so they're just trying to kind of gauge and guess just based on the amount of interest. As you see, there's going to be a lot of interest in people who want to have chickens in the city, and they're trying to guess how much time they'd put into having to go out and inspect the yard, inspect the structure, and then the complaints that would come from the neighbors, and follow up to make sure that even if the structure is installed properly, that it's maintained properly through the years. But if we stopped checking on those, we'd have no idea what kind of condition they're kept in.
So just from council members, we've got 5 minutes at the end. We're trying to hold to a 10-minute presentation. If he gets done early, then we can.
I don't have too
write
many
our
more
questions.
slides, so I think I'll be pretty
Okay.
close on time. So, as I mentioned, it's a shared responsibility because it is a code. It's code enforcement code that we don't allow chickens inside of Ogden City, so it truly falls with code enforcement. But it's an animal-related issue, so it's a shared responsibility. But if we were to allow chickens in the city, we would need a situation where one entity is trained and equipped and has the resources to deal with the inspections, the care, the maintenance, the issues that come along with chickens. And I'm guessing most logically that would fall in animal services, and that's why we're saying that it would require another full-time officer just to handle the expanded duties. Right now, since bringing animal services over to the police department in 2012, we worked very diligently to make them more proactive, to get them out in the neighborhoods trying to locate problems before people have to call in about them, to take care of roaming dogs or vicious dogs before it becomes a dog bite. And the same with issues with all our other animals in the city. But that keeps them very busy to be able to do that, to stay on top of the calls for service and to be proactive. Without any additional resources, we think this added responsibility would take away from their ability to be proactive and try and prevent problems related to animals before the animal complaints take place. The other issue I think you should be considered is dogs and chickens don't go together. Dogs' instincts are to go after chickens. If any of you have dealt with dogs, and especially dogs that are more bird dogs, they don't get along well. It's not like dogs and cats don't get along. We estimate we have anywhere from 30,000 licensed to as many as maybe 90,000 total dogs, including those unlicensed, inside the city of Ogden. Those dogs living alongside chickens that are wandering in yards, that are getting out of coops, or even that are kept in coops that aren't necessarily secure from dogs. We're confident we're going to see a large increase of complaints of dog attacks on the chickens in the city, and the disturbances will come out of dogs attacking chickens in someone's yard or in their front yard. So, as I mentioned, I didn't have a lot of slides, so I do have plenty of time. I'm going to have Chad Everett, who's our animal services supervisor, come up in case I can't answer some of your specific questions on animal services.
I have one question on the individuals coming in to register their chickens. If this becomes an ordinance, would that increase your paperwork, and would you have to increase your office staff to handle that increase in business?
Yeah, I think along with our animal service officers in the field, our office staff also, in addition to handling licensing and complaints and dealing with the return of animals that have been impounded and taken to the shelter, they also dispatch all of the calls. The Ogden Weber Dispatch Center doesn't dispatch animal service calls. The animal service department does dispatch their calls. So they're pretty at the max of their resource abilities right now. So it would either take some time away from what they're currently doing, or we'd have to push that into somebody else's field other than our current.
Or add a personnel into that, or full-time or part-time?
Yeah.
Chair White, I've got a few questions, if I might. If a chicken owner violates the ordinance and the chickens need to either be confiscated or disposed of, how will the city deal with those kind of things?
That's a good question. We don't have facilities, as far as I'm aware. The shelter is not set up to handle chickens. We're certainly not trained or equipped to dispose of or deal with chickens. So as I mentioned, this is going to bring on a whole other area of expertise, training, and resources we're not currently equipped with that we'd have to come up to speed on and make our animal services department able to deal with.
You're going to
those
have to invent a new process for this then.
Yeah, and we'd obviously look to other cities that are doing this and look at what they're doing. We're not going to reinvent the wheel by any means.
How about fines? Of course, it's not. There's no ordinance right now, but currently, if you have to fine someone, what is the fines? And
They would fall under code enforcement. Well, as far as the chickens violations, they would, but like, so you're referring to like, what's the fine for a
Right.
dog or an unlicensed animal?
If they're unlicensed and they're holding, you know.
Oh, so if you were to, yeah, I think Jared might, I don't know, we wouldn't cite someone for.
That's probably a question for the next presenter.
Yeah.
Because they don't cite for this, Jared does.
As mentioned, it's a partnership. We handle answering as many questions as we can, but
Right.
any citations be given
Okay,
by
great.
code enforcement.
And the last question I have is complaints. If there's an ordinance, would you recommend that currently I think it's a complaint-driven situation, so somebody needs to their neighbors need to kind of complain about them. Would you recommend that continue to be the practice, or would you recommend that it be a proactive situation of where code enforcement or animal control actually, when they discover these things, that they actually...
Just in general, in police work and animal services, anything we can do proactively is going to be far more effective than anything we do in response to a problem. Anything we can do in our city to get ahead of problems and solve problems before they're already a problem is going to make us better, whether it be a crime problem or an animal service problem. So having a process in place that allowed for an inspection of the coop as it went up and allowed some time frame for reinspection to ensure that it's maintained in the same manner in which it was required to be installed, I think would be very beneficial just to the overall health and welfare of the city.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
I have a couple of questions. So you're saying that, I mean, I'm just basing it on the numbers you just said, that you'd have to have one more person to take care of that, which I'm doing the math thing, but so 4 people are taking care of 2,700 complaints. That means one person takes care of 675 complaints?
Yeah, and those were the complaints from 2014. As I mentioned, I wish I had those 2015, 2016 numbers for you, because I think you'd see a same numerical increase, probably about the same rate over those next couple of years.
So based on that, you're saying that probably we'd see a 25% increase in complaints?
Yeah. About 20% is what we're thinking. Not just complaints, though, just in total work related to dealing with this issue, whether it be helping to inspect permits, and the complaints and the issues that come just surrounding with the other animals that are going to come into the area. Like I said, the skunks, the mice, the rats, the raccoons are typically more common in the areas where we have chickens.
Everybody, can I ask a related question to yours? So you said about a 25% increase in incidents that need to be handled by these officers. Is that 25% based on anecdotal or experience, or is it observational based on what other cities are doing? How are you coming up with that 25% number?
Yeah, it's more anecdotal, to be honest with you. We don't have a lot of experience. I mean, we don't have a lot of cities, I guess, of our similar size that they were able to find. Or they reached out and looked a little bit to try and find what those were, but we were just trying to kind of estimate the amount of time it would take to spend going out and looking at a coop to fill out the paperwork based on how much time it takes to fill out the paperwork to license a dog. If we're going to fill out the paperwork to license a chicken coop, it's probably going to be about the same amount of information on the form, more or less, that you're going to get: owner, address, and those type of things. An inspection, if that's part of the process, is going to be something in addition that we don't do right now, as we license cats, or excuse me, license dogs in the city. Let's not start down that road.
So one more follow-up. When you mentioned that there would be an increase in dogs attacking chickens, is that also anecdotal, or is there...
I've had experience personally with that. So, and I've seen that where I live in my community, they allow chickens, and I've seen several occasions where significant neighbor disputes and issues have arisen out of dogs attacking chickens. And it's something I just think about regularly, because I see chickens out of their coops wandering in people's yards, and I know how many dogs, and especially people who keep dogs as hunting dogs, are in that area, that just the nature of dogs is they're going to be out wandering a little bit, and it's just kind of it's a recipe for disaster in a sense, having those two together.
So we think other cities have seen an increase, but have we quantifiably identified that there is an increase?
I think we'll have to do a little more. I added that from my experience actually today at the end of into that slide, or just before I submitted it to Amy. But we'll certainly do the research and make sure we can back that up with some data.
If there's an ordinance in place, how long will it take you to organize the animal services to come up to speed with this process?
Oh, I think we could, if we're given the resources we need to bring in the new people in. It's going to certainly take some time to do a little training and decide the process if we are impounding chickens or if we are taking chickens. But I'm sure we could get up to speed within a few months if we were given the resources we needed and to be able to do it.
Chief, how many specific complaints are we getting about chickens right now?
I don't take those, so give me your best.
Yeah, the best, in our current system that we have right now, we don't have a way of tracking how many complaints regarding chickens. It's all falls under an animal complaint category.
But we don't know complaints about dogs, for example, either? It all goes on a one
Correct.
broad?
Yep. Animal complaint requires dead raccoons. It could be skunks, raccoons, live raccoons, cats, dogs, birds, chickens. All that falls under one category.
So earlier you said that you do know that of these calls, about 2 per week are about chickens, but you don't know of those 2 how many are to complain about chickens or to ask if people can own chickens.
Me personally, because I work dispatch, that's all I do every day. It's 100% of them's complaints about chickens.
100% of them?
Mm-hmm.
About 2?
Yep.
Okay. Do you know how many, is there an estimation, is there a way to know how many people may own chickens in our city right now?
Roughly, according to the population, maybe, rough guess, maybe 2%.
Maybe 2%.
Yeah. We don't get a whole lot of chicken complaints compared relatively to the dog and cats and other animals, but they are getting more and more increasing.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Mayor White, members of the council, appreciate your time this evening. Before I kind of go in and get started, I'll kind of go on a background a little bit. Currently, as in Ogden City, chickens are not allowed. We just kind of went through some of the things that we deal with right now, but the other thing that myself and my staff did is we reached out to other communities that have passed ordinances that allowed chickens to talk to their code services personnel to kind of talk about what issues they've had, what's come across, and what they've had to kind of deal with. I kind of broke this into a couple different areas. I have concerns that we have. We don't know, if they would happen or not, but just things that we've thought about, and then just some items for consideration. I'll apologize up front when I get into those items. It looks eerily similar to the fact-finding presentation that the council staff put together. They did a great job. I promise I didn't copy it. But we did have a lot of similarities in there. So just a couple of things I wanted to start off with first was just some concerns as we've looked at this and I've talked with the staff about it, and then other comments, like I said, from other jurisdictions. One of the things that popped up quite regularly as we went through and discussed this and talked about it with other jurisdictions is they said one of the things to be prepared for was once we allowed chickens, then all of a sudden we started getting a lot of calls about, well, why can't I have this and that in regards to having other animals? I like these little miniature goats. They're really, really cute. How come I can't have those? How come I can't have, my little pot-bellied pig? In one community, they said it wasn't pot-bellied pig. It was just pigs in general, big pigs. They had a real big push that people wanted those. 2 communities that we talked to have actually gone back in since they approved their chicken ordinance and revised it now to allow roosters. There was a big push, at first it was just chickens, and then once the chickens were in the door, then people came back in and started saying, well, now we need roosters. That's a concern for us.
Who are these 2 communities? Oh, I'm sorry, we're waiting till the end. Sorry, apologize.
So it's not that I have anything against roosters. There's some beautiful roosters out there, there really are. It's just if a rooster decides to get vocal, such as, like a cackling hen and stuff, typically the times that that's going to happen are not going to be times that I'm going to have staff on the clock to go and respond to those concerns from other citizens. So that was one of the things. Another thing that came across quite a bit was the attraction of rodents and predators. And that basically was revolved around if the chickens or their chicken coops themselves were not properly cared for. So if they're keeping them clean, if they're taking care of those items, it can be avoided. But if they're, if they don't stay on top of that, it had potential side effects. Another thing, and I kind of touched on this a little bit already, but the ability to address the complaints when they're received. Some of those hardships includes items such as like the location. So if we receive a complaint right now and we have to go out and follow up on it, a lot of times the chickens, or the complaint, whatever it is we're following up on, is going to be in their backyard. If we can't see it from a public way, then we've got to go and ask the building owner or the property owner if we can enter their property. If they deny us access to the property and we have reasonable cause, then we've got to spend time going through, get a warrant, and going through that process, which can become extremely time-consuming. And so, some of the complaints sometimes are hard to address based on the location of where the complaint's at. Again, the timing, if it's a middle of the night thing, if it's an early morning thing, and then sometimes a contact. And I'll go into this a little bit later. If it's a rental property, or even if it's not a rental property, a lot of times, people sometimes aren't excited to see us when we pull up. We understand. And so sometimes it's hard to get in touch with individuals. Another item that came back to us feedback that we got was that the code enforcement services and other jurisdictions felt like there was a disproportionate balance of time that had to be dedicated to the enforcement of chickens, as opposed to larger items. So typically, the number of chicken owners or those that are going to have chickens is going to be a small percentage of your overall whole. But sometimes those items, when you're trying to play mediator between two different property owners, became extremely time-consuming. And we see that now on other items, and so I can see how this could come into play. So that was just one of the big comments they made that was, it got reported to us several times that when chickens were not allowed in these other cities and property owners had them, they really didn't have a lot of issues with them because the property owners were very diligent, kept them quiet, they kept them clean, they took care of it. They said one of the things that they saw, and this doesn't pertain to everybody, I'm not trying to put everybody into the same category, but in some instances, once they became legal, some of the property owners were not as diligent in the care and maintaining and watching after them as they had been before. So that's kind of some of our concerns. The considerations I'll probably go through a little bit quicker just because some of it's repetitive. We would request that if this was to move forward and it was adopted, that there needs to be a maximum number of chickens allowed on the property. We don't want an indefinite number. We would like to see that capped. I'm not trying to tell you what that right number is. That's not a number that I know off the top of my head, but we would like to make sure that there's a reasonable number imposed upon it. The location. This is one of the hardest things we have to do, whether it's chickens or not. But when somebody's doing something in their backyard and they say, well, it's in my backyard, I'm going to put it where I want. But sometimes it has adverse effects on the adjoining property owner. And, that can infringe upon their property right as well. And again, it's a difficult situation for the staff when they have to go out there and try to balance between two angry property owners and not try to make a judgment call on who's right or who's wrong, but just try to make a good call. Another thing we'd like to see is, and again, these are just things we'd need to work through, but we'd need the ability to track and quickly verify. So if we're going to have licenses, if we're going to have permits, if those things are items that would be required, we would need to be able to have the ability to track and verify that quickly, so we're not spending a ton of time trying to decide, are this legal chickens and these are not legal chickens, or how's that going to work? They're just some of the things that we need to address and take care of. It would be our recommendation we'd like to see, and it doesn't need to be anything elaborate, but an education program for owners to ensure the proper boarding and care of the birds if they're going to have them. And you could pretty much say that with a lot of animals. This one was really interesting to me, but when we talked about them, I kind of throw it up as a question: slaughtering the chickens, is it allowed? Several other jurisdictions, specifically in ordinances, didn't allow it, and so it was kind of a little easier to address. But a majority of them, at least when we talked to, said that they didn't address it in their ordinance. And so where it wasn't addressed, was it allowed or wasn't it? So they would get into a situation where when they had somebody complain about it, they would go out and enforce and say, well, you can't do that, but you can't do it based on what? And then, is it offensive to the adjoining neighbor that had to watch it happen, and how was it done, and was it done humane? And then probably one of our biggest concerns and a consideration that needs to be taken care of is, and this one's kind of long, but will single-family dwelling rental properties be allowed to participate? So if I have rentals, are you going to allow it in single families? And if so, are they going to be required to have to get permission from the property owner? Because again, they're renting, it's not their property. So, is the property owner going to be required to approve something like that? And what about multifamily complexes and trailer parks? We have all of those in Ogden City, and typically when somebody sees something somewhere, a lot of times people make the assumption that if it's there, then it's okay and I can have it, and so things just kind of grow. And so it's kind of hard at times to say who can have what and who can't. And so rental properties are difficult already for us in a number of ways. And I can see if we start getting rental properties with, chickens on top of them, I'm not saying it shouldn't be allowed, but I can see issues there. So, who would be required to get the license if a license was to be required? And then, just a few different things we'd have to go through. One of the things right now, so like when code enforcement has to go out and we issue citations, we send citations to the property owner of record. And so if it's the occupant that has them, and the occupant is a tenant of a rental property, but we're sending notice and citation to the property owner, that's one of the areas we would probably request that if this was to become ordinance and it's a rental property, that they really need to have permission from the property owner so that we can get a better flow of communication as it goes through. And with that, I'm pretty much about out of time, so I'll take your questions.
All right, Councilmember Lopez, I think you had a question.
I was just curious, you mentioned two communities that had issues where people came back wanting roosters, and I was wondering what were those communities, who were they?
And I went to grab that sheet when I came up. I believe Orem City is one of them, and I cannot remember the other one off the top of my head, but they've reversed theirs. I think it was Alpine and Orem. They now have revised their ordinance to allow roosters.
Thank you.
Are some of your concerns that you've listed come from these other communities? Did they have the same concerns you had, or did they have different ones, or what were their response?
We had great conversation with them. A lot of the concerns that we had were very similar to what they faced and what they went through, and so we had long discussions on how they were addressing those and how they were taking care of those items. Some of them were new to us. Some of the items they brought up were things that we hadn't really even thought about. So it was kind of a mix of both. Some of the concerns that we have now that we're going through are just based off of items that we're currently already dealing with when somebody calls us to complain about chickens.
Imagine they were quite helpful, because then you know exactly what you're looking at if this becomes a situation.
Absolutely.
You mentioned something about verification, that the chickens were illegal. What do we do now, like with dogs?
Well, with dogs, I got to admit, I hand those over to animal control. I don't really chase down the dogs myself. Obviously, though, they have to be collared and have their tags and stuff on them. It would be really cool, but I don't think we're going to see a lot of little collars on the chickens running around. So, I don't know how we address that. Like I said, it's some of the things that we could work through, but, how we validate that this individual went through and obtained their chickens legally and got permission. I just want to kind of work through some kind of way that we could validate it quickly, so we're just not spending a lot of time trying to run it down going, are these ones good or are these not?
A related question? So it sounds like we're having a hard time tracking data, at least with some level of specificity. Excuse me. Is our new software system, the ERP that we've spent a lot of money and a lot of time implementing, will that provide any benefits or new ways of tracking this information?
Yeah, it will. So the new ERP product that we're going into, we can actually go in and list every specific ordinance individually. And then if we are issuing a notice of violation or a citation on that specific ordinance, then I can track it that way and show that. So currently right now I talk to the Code Services staff, and they get about 2 to 3 calls a week right now about chickens. They're not all complaints. Some of them are just asking, are they legal? Can I have them? Or where in the city can I have them? So they're both, it's a balance of people inquiring about where they can have them, and then some of the others are complaint driven. The question was asked earlier about the citations. So if we get into a situation where we have to do code enforcement action and we get to issue citations, so the very first thing that we do is we send a notice of violation asking, again, and that goes to the property owner, and so sometimes that's where it gets tricky with rental properties. We ask them to, abate or remove whatever the issue is. So in this case right now where chickens aren't allowed, if somebody wanted chickens, we would say you need to remove the chickens. We give them 15 days to remove the chickens, and then we do a follow-up with them. Our goal is always to try to work with individuals to try to comply, and so if they kind of have a plan and a roadmap of what they're trying to do, then oftentimes we will work with them. If they just kind of totally ignore us, then at the end of that 15 days, we'll issue our first citation. The first citation is $125. Then they get another 15 days to comply. If we have to issue a second citation, it jumps to $250. And then they get another 15 days. If they refuse to comply, it goes to $500, and it stays at $500 each time after that. And eventually we will then take it to district court.
Got a quick question. Who would do this education, and how would we verify that it's been done?
That's a fantastic question. I wish I had the answer for you. That's something we would ask for, that we would ask to probably be involved and want to work through in the process if this was to move forward.
Okay.
Jared, how many of those fines that we levy are actually paid?
Oh, citywide right now, I would say you're probably about maybe 40% actually get paid, and some of that 40% comes with a little bit of a nudge from us. Everything else above that, we have to go we chase down through collections.
How much does it cost us in collections to collect?
If we can do it in-house with our staff, then obviously it's the cost of the city to employ that individual. If we gets to a point where we have to send it out to a collection agency, then we only recover maybe 25% of the actual cost.
So not many people are paying, and of those that are paying, we're not really getting our money back.
It's a challenge. Collections is it's a full-time thing for us. So we currently have 3 code services officer. We're getting ready to hire a 4th, but between the 3 that we have right now, we average, and this is all violations, citywide. The last 3 years, we've been around 6,000 cases. That's active, open code enforcement cases a year. So we you're right around 6,000. You got 3 people trying to juggle.
Time's up.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.
All right. Next is Greg Montgomery.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. So in terms of a planning perspective, I want to talk a little bit about land use and how we look at things and how you ought to take a look at the consideration. And I want to start off by Ogden's early roots, the early subdivisions. Early Ogden was laid out in a 10-acre block with what they called the Plat of Zion concept, which is basically 1-acre lots, so you have 10 lots on a block. And those 1-acre lots were intended to provide for an agrarian community. You had small animals, you had space. Larger animals were kept across the river into larger farm areas. But that's how the layout of Ogden first took out. So if you look at some of the plats of Ogden, you see that theme, and you see the houses actually rotated per block so that it gave an open feeling. And so you had room to accommodate the outbuildings, the small animals, and distance between you and your neighbor. That pattern then changed in development, and come the late 1800s, early 1900s, that same 10-acre block, which had 10 lots, was divided into 104 lots. Another street was added and 2 alleys. And all of a sudden, the lots went from 1 acre to 3,400 square feet, which really then changed and signaled a change of how we were going to do land use, of what people expected to have happen on their property because of those small areas. That land pattern changed again, because what they found out happened when they created those smaller lots was generally people bought 2 lots. So the subdivision pattern changed again to a lot system where you had a 6,800 square foot lot, 50-foot frontage, and combined the 2 earlier lots. At that time, though, the pattern of how land was used in Ogden City began to alter, because now, going through that change from the animal to now housing, and a change of how did you look at your property, the rear yard areas then became areas for entertainment and open space. The front yard became areas of the semi-public area between you and the street, and the nature of how we use our spaces and our lots in Ogden again altered. That has further changed as we look at the present trends of subdivision. Generally, we have larger lots, but those lots become shallower. What had been maybe an 80 or 90-foot rear yard now is down to 15 feet. And so the most modern subdivisions that we have in the city have much larger homes on those lots and smaller yards around that lot. And so even though the density may be the same, the space that we have around the buildings has been reduced much smaller. And I think what happened, and I think what we learned from this and why the city ordinance has changed over time, is we really learned that the best neighbor policy is distance between animals and neighbors. And we saw those, as the lots changed, we saw the ordinances change to adjust with that concept, that distance made good neighbors. And we saw that start to take place because the lots became smaller, less things were allowed on the lots. As we talk about this, it really is one of perspective. We talk about the topic at hand of being chickens. And when we think about chickens, we think about, okay, there are benefits to it, lessons that we can learn. We can take responsibilities, teach our children. They can be food production, whether it be eggs or the chickens themselves. Generally, when you look at chickens, sometimes that perspective goes into the other animals, what we'd call farm animals. And it all depends on that perspective you're looking at, because if you look at that and solely look at that, you fail to start to see how other things are placed together, how the community works in terms of all aspects. And sometimes if we're only looking at that, we lose our focus of what are we really looking at. What is it that we're really trying to accomplish? And that becomes our very first goal, is what is it we're trying to accomplish when we look at any type of land use regulation? And that perspective becomes important. The decisions you have to make are really a balancing test of individuality and community. On the one hand, the individual concerns, they have certain conditions that they want to have happen. They have certain desires and expectations of what they could do. And also, every individual has certain abilities of how can they carry that out. And all of those things are important when you look at what an individual is trying to do and bringing all those together. But on the other hand, you have what we'd call civility. And in that civility, we're taking a look at what does it take to live together. Because that's what a city and a community is. It's not just what is the individual doing, but what does it take collectively then to live together? Understanding that my actions affect other people. They affect my neighbors. And I have as much as responsibility for what I impact them as I do for what I'm doing on my own. And that is the real civility test. And that's the balance test that starts to take place when you have any discussion of what should take place in terms of land uses. we generally accept the fact that zoning and other things are based on health and welfare of a community, of what we're trying to do. And so those become the balancing tests of the individual and their desires and things they want to accomplish, plus the civility test of, well, how does it then impact other people who are next to them, and how we think of those other people and their impacts in addition to the individuals. So I think it's important to take a look at the overall goals. What is it we have said as a city we're trying to accomplish? In their general plan, we have three statements regarding housing, land use, and neighborhoods. In housing, we're saying we're trying to create a variety, a mix of densities, and a safe, stable, and revitalized Ogden. We also say that one of our main goals and our overall objective is that we have land uses that emphasize revitalization of the community, and we preserve and enhance neighborhoods and the experiences that take place in those neighborhoods. And then we say in neighborhoods, we're trying to create an area where residents are involved in creating a safe, livable, and attractive neighborhood. That becomes the broad perspective. That becomes the overall vision of what we've said as Ogden, what we're trying to achieve, both in housing, land use, and neighborhoods. Those become the perspective issues. Those become the civility tests of the decisions which we make. And again, as we come into a society now where there's more and more demand for so many things, whether it be, I've got more cars. Maybe I've got toys, which are boats and trailers and those. I need storage for things. I want a garden. I have pets. I want to have recreation. I want to have privacy. I have hobbies. As more of those things compile on smaller and smaller pieces of land, there becomes that test of how do we make living together in the city work? Because it's a challenge. When we see all those things lumped against maybe something we want to have, trying to balance those out and how do we make it work together becomes an important decision to make sure that we are following the overall perspective that we have established ourselves with our general plan. This map, for example, shows present-day Ogden, and the blue area are those areas that are an acre in size. Take the original plat that the city started off with 1 acre lot sizes, and what we have today that are acre lot sizes that are zoned residential. Now in this map, a lot of that blue are things like schools and churches, as some may be undeveloped land, cemeteries, but those are the things that make up that we have presently as an acre in size that is zoned residential. Now, this next one is looking at what do we have in terms of lots residential that are 14,000 square feet or larger. Why I chose 14,000 square feet is, for example, Layton City. That's the minimum size Layton has for chickens in their community. You have to have a lot of at least that size. So this gives you an idea of how Ogden has developed compared to maybe other cities and their standards of where they allow chickens. Where could that occur if we adopted what Layton says in terms of minimum lot size? Or if we look at what are the standard lot sizes most communities have, which is 8,000 square feet. So now this shows lots 8,000 square feet that are zoned residential. Again, they're not all residential uses. They have the schools, the cemeteries, the other things in them. But they're zoned residential. So you see, again, those areas of Ogden that are less than 8,000 square feet, but that is a typical lot in many other communities. So again, looking at that perspective of, okay, as we start to look and get tighter and tighter with things, how does that impact not only the individual, what they want to do, but also their neighbors? That civility test. Other considerations that are out there is as we grow and expand in our limited boundaries, we become in conflict more with the wildlife. We see stories of deer coming down, and every winter, complaints about, I've got deer in my yard, what are you going to do about it? As we expand, we come into their habitat and they come into ours, and we want something to happen about that. What are our expectations as we create that interface between wildlife and civilization and development? It has been mentioned that some of the concerns that could happen are we see an increase of other types of animals. Raccoons are one we've seen lately. We've seen a lot of increase in raccoons coming into the community. From the things that we've been able to gather, looking at sites about raising chickens and that, they always caution that raccoons will be a problem in terms of how you take care of things. Raccoons will go after chickens. That doesn't mean we'll have an increase of raccoons, but we create another food source for those animals, which, again, we have a hard time trying to control in the city. And we really don't have any control. It's left to the property owner to control them. That's the property owner to do everything about that. We don't do anything about raccoons, mice, and skunks and that. That becomes a property owner's responsibility. But what are those expectations we have when we start to add more and more to add to the wildlife conflict and to urbanization? The other considerations we have is how do you get the message out? And I'll put this, the truth according to Google. Generally, people turn to the computer, Google a topic, whatever comes up, that's right, without doing any further research of what is done, what is needed to be done to make that right. With that right, there are responsibilities. But generally, we find that what takes place is if it shows up, therefore it's true, and I don't worry about the requirements. Case in point is vacation rentals. We go through a whole process of 2 years for vacation rentals. We allow them, but then no one comes into, well, of the maybe 60 or 70 we know of, 4 come in to get licensed. Now that it is a right, I don't have to do the responsibilities to make it a right. It's just a right. And we have to deal with those situations and what takes place there. So those are some things I think that are important to consider in land use and how you look at this and how you look at this issue, especially in the terms of our perspective in Ogden City. Any questions?
Questions?
Got 2 minutes.
Just real quick, one of the questions we had was maybe tell us why former planning commissions voted the way they did and what were some of the issues they really had to deal with.
I think the main reasons that they voted the way they did, one is concern about concentration of land uses, that we don't have a lot of large lots like other communities, and the conflicts that exist between property owners, that being a concern. The other is, do we have the ability to finance the needed additional policing and patrolling of that? And is that something we have? I think the other thing that came up in discussion too was that a lot of people bought into Ogden by the idea that other than dogs and cats, those are the only animals they have to deal with. They didn't buy into being into the country and into farmland. They bought with an expectation that this was urban. They didn't have to deal with other animals.
Greg, when the Planning Commission makes these considerations, is it taking into account the amount of people in our city that are perhaps desiring these to happen?
Yeah, they didn't look at public clamor as a reason to act on something. They looked at what are the principles, how do we feel those principles relate to what we want to see happen as our overall goals in Ogden.
So it will be okay to, even though if there's quite a considerable percentage of people that may desire to be able to have this ordinance, Planning Commission would ignore that and be okay to recommend something even if it's against perhaps the majority of what the people in the community want.
Well, I guess you'd have to quantify and define how do you determine majority. Is over 50% of people, is that the majority? Oh, and I didn't get the shot off. We lost by 1.
Vice Chair.
My sound was down.
I think it's that, again, that balancing act. What are the important attributes you want to have Ogden and portray Ogden to be? That's the balance test. And I think, that's the decisions that's made. So I don't know that because there are people who want it and there are people who don't want it, that all of a sudden becomes a coin toss that says, what are your overall perspectives you're trying to accomplish? And those become your guidance.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have one. If I petitioned an ordinance to like what we were considering this evening, What is the timetable on that, Greg?
Well, it would have to go through the Planning Commission, whether it's going to be a petition or whether it's a direction. Planning Commission would have to hold a public hearing. Generally, you'd be one to 2 months out for that. They'd make a recommendation, and then it'd be into your court, depending on what time frame you would take to make a decision.
And you have to look on your schedule of when to plan that into your agenda then?
No, we just take it whenever a petition comes in. We try to have that then on the next regular Planning Commission meeting.
So for a public hearing, it's about 2 months then?
Well, depending again when it comes in. If something is in a minimum of 18 days before the Planning Commission meeting, we generally schedule it for then that meeting.
Okay. All right.
One last quick question. Can the council take a look at a petition without going through the Planning Commission?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. The Weber Morgen Health Department. Ms. Gladwell.
Hello, my name is Michaela Gladwell. I'm the Environmental Health Director for Weber Morgen Health Department, and I appreciate the time to come and just, present some information from a public health perspective. And I want to just sort of reiterate that the Health Department isn't really on either side of this debate. I just want to provide good information, including some of the risks associated with live poultry, as well as some of the prevention steps that can be taken to protect public health and safety. So in the course of investigating disease or outbreaks, public health staff routinely asks about exposure to live poultry. That is because live poultry often carry germs such as Salmonella, and the germs can live in the poultry, or the live birds' droppings on their skin and the feathers. You see beaks, feet, cages, coops, water dishes, plants, soil, anything that can the bird is in contact with could potentially provide an area for bacteria. Children, the elderly, and anyone with a suppressed immune system is particularly susceptible to the effects of Salmonella, but there are things that can be done to prevent transmission and contamination. As with any disease, frequent and thorough hand washing with soap and water is important, especially when handling birds or any of their equipment, living space, anything that they come into contact with. If you can't wash your hands, use hand sanitizer until you can. Don't nuzzle or kiss the chicks or the adult birds. Animal to human contact is really easy that way, and so watching little kids is really important that they wash their hands after touching birds. Also, failure to maintain a clean coop could result in sanitation issues. We've heard a lot about, rodent issues, other vermin, animals seeking food, or other types of prey animals coming into the area. But, anytime you have the coop in a dirty situation, that's going to be a draw for other rodents. Some prevention measures in the home include not preparing food, eating or drinking in areas where the birds live and roam, keeping a dedicated pair of footwear that is used when working with animals outside of the home, again, cleaning the cages and any related equipment outside. Don't bring things in the house and clean cages or equipment inside your home. And it seems obvious, but don't bring the live poultry in the house, especially in the kitchen. Any toys that might be in the yard that little kids would, leave out that might come into contact with those areas should also be cleaned. We also have concerns with preventing foodborne illness in eggs. And so again, maintaining a clean coop is going to help keep those eggs cleaner by collecting them often and refrigerating them immediately. That helps. Dirt and debris can be removed from the egg with cloth or fine sandpaper, but washing the egg does present a risk of drawing the germs inside the egg. And then, as always with any raw food, cooking the eggs thoroughly is going to help to eliminate that Salmonella bacteria that can make you sick. The Centers for Disease Control reports that outbreaks linked to contact with live poultry have increased in recent years, and this correlates with more people keeping backyard flocks. In 2016, we saw a record number of illnesses nationwide that were linked to backyard poultry. This link on this PowerPoint will take you to the CDC website where you can see live poultry outbreaks by year, along with other disease type outbreaks. This is a chart put together to show 2012 through 2017 the number of outbreaks investigated, the total number of cases. This ranged in many states. From 2005 it was reported in 23. This year it's in 48 states. Shows the number of hospitalizations, deaths, and this last column shows the cases that have been reported so far in Utah for 2017. And again, the link on the bottom will take you to all of this data. That's all I have for you. Do you have any questions?
How many of those are, do you know, in Utah, how many are in Ogden or Weber County?
You know, I don't think, I've got Amy Carter, who is our epidemiologist at the health department. Do you know, I don't think it was broken up that way, but.
I want to say roughly, so far year to date.
Yeah, you have to come up to the mic, sorry.
Sorry.
Amy's like, I don't want to.
I just thought I could yell out.
There's a lot of people watching as well tonight.
Oh, you're good. I would say a rough number estimate would be year to date. We've probably had about 10 associated enteric illnesses with linked to backyard poultry. So, and I would say, if my memory serves me correct, in last year, I believe we had about 7 year to date, and I believe the year before was about 3. So, kind of matching some of those national trends, we've also seen those numbers go up slightly.
Is that in Ogden or Weber County?
That would be in Weber and Morgen counties. I believe all of our enteric illnesses associated with poultry have, at least in 2017 so far, have been in Weber County residents. So I'd have to look further to break those numbers down into what cities they were living in.
Do you have anyone that calls you and asks you questions about cleanliness or?
So in the environment,
education.
Yeah, in the environmental health division of the health department, we mainly respond to complaints, nuisance complaints, housing, you know, among other things. But when we would get involved with something like this, it would be a cleanliness or sanitation issue. I wish that I had looked to see if we had specific complaints to chickens. Ours are broken into animal. So I could find that data, but you know, generally when we respond, it's a complaint about a sanitation issue. We're seeing rats as a result of, you know, animal conditions or things like that. So that would be our role in response.
Okay, the Salmonella is a reportable that the hospitals have to report to you too. So if we needed to, if there was an outbreak in a certain part of the community, you could
absolutely, yeah,
quickly and say in this cohort of area we're seeing
absolutely
a higher
yes.
rate.
Yeah, and so that would be the other. I mean, obviously, the other part of the health department response. We would track it on the environmental health side, but as Neil said, also the epidemiology side. So yeah, we would be able to see
where
these pockets may occur, or you know,
just like any
any
outbreak.
Absolutely.
So I have a question regarding you know, I asked earlier if someone was going to be licensed chicken owner, chicken hair. Well, I don't know what you call a person that owns chickens.
Chicken hipsters.
That's right, one of those guys. And even the Ogden Chicken Alliance, in their wish list for an ordinance, they recommended that a training program be in place so that they could, you've given a lot of good information that I don't think is general knowledge that would certainly be important for someone who owned chickens to know. How would you recommend this training program be organized or?
I think that as long as you're hitting the main public safety and health points. I mean, we would be happy to partner with whatever agency decides to, whether it's Ogden City, whether it's the Chicken Alliance, or whoever wanted to develop this program to be available for any kind of resource. We could, I don't know if you're thinking like, actual classes, or
they would
if it's
need
something
to be,
that
they need to have some kind of
just
a
public
certification that
information.
they have been through the class in order to get
Right.
a license, so that they would know how to deal with a sick chicken. I don't know if you take a sick chicken to the vet. I don't. There's a lot of things I just don't know.
I don't know.
And
But we'd be happy to be a resource for trying to come up with something like that in conjunction with whomever you know.
Okay.
Or even if they were forming a pamphlet at the registration, they would give out that material. Would you be part of that also?
We could be. The CDC has a lot of information on their website as well with regards to chickens and live poultry and eggs, and so there is a lot of information out there that we could put together. We could
Steer them to that site.
Yeah.
Reputable site.
A reputable site, yes.
Yeah. We've put you on the spot a little bit and asked for your recommendation. I have one other.
Okay.
It sounds like keeping a clean coop is very important in this process. And how would you recommend we monitor or enforce that? Would you suggest that we inspect the coops, or just do it based on complaints?
I don't really know. I can speak from the perspective of the health department when we are called on a complaint of sanitation. Say it's, my neighbor isn't cleaning up after their dog. It's sort of a best judgment thing. Is it excessive? Can you smell it? Is it from the street? Are there flies everywhere? It's sort of a judgment. I don't know that we have a specific sanitation regulation that says like how much can be anywhere, but we'd have to do a little research on that, and I don't know if it would come in the form of an inspection with the permit, because you're only seeing what's happening at one time, at this moment.
Exactly.
So, unfortunately, a lot of the inspections we do come as a result of a complaint.
And just one other, do you know if any other communities have some type of way to monitor the upkeep of a coop or the cleanliness of a coop?
I am not aware. I just don't know. I don't know if the code enforcement may have looked into that.
Can you give us an idea of how much and what kind of other complaints do you guys deal with for animal-related sanitation or those kinds of things?
It varies from, we've had, horse complaints to rats coming from, unkempt canals to dogs and cats. It really just depends. Hoarding houses with animals. We usually work in conjunction, or always, with animal control on things like that. So I don't have numbers. I wish I would have looked before coming, because I could give you, sort of a ballpark by the year of how many animal complaints we get, but they're usually because of sanitation. They're not,
Okay, thank you. And my other quick question, are there other Salmonella-related complaints you guys deal with besides that are not attributed to chickens, that are attributed to something else?
Usually they are attributed to foodborne illness, so undercooked food, investigations, contamination that way.
And do you guys get those
Yes.
Often?
Do you know kind of a ballpark?
Don't go far the next time.
Sorry.
We do tend to get a handful of salmonella cases reported amongst other enteric illnesses. The other one we would probably focus on with backyard poultry would be Campylobacter, which is another type of bacterial infection that chickens can carry. I would say in the summer months, we get anywhere from maybe 5 to 10 cases of these in general, regardless of exposure risk. And then in the winter months, maybe 1 or 2 at the most a month on average.
Follow up before you sit down.
Yeah.
So the 10 cases that you mentioned previously, those were attributed specifically to backyard chickens?
They were attributed to backyard poultry. So we also, some of those may have been attributed to having baby chicks or baby ducklings around Easter time especially. We tend to have people purchasing those in their homes and having them that way. Some keep them and put them into the backyard. Some end up getting rid of them later.
Pigeons are a part of that?
I can't say that. Only maybe once in my memory can I recall pigeons being a risk factor during an interview, but if it was, we would potentially put that in the same category.
Okay, you might have to turn that down.
It's always on your question.
Turn that down a little.
The speaker to you.
You beat the buzzer.
Sorry. Thank you,
Thank you both
Michaela.
for being here.
So just a real quick follow-up question. What happens if a chicken has salmonella? What do you do with it? Or what happens to that?
So,
Or a duck, or a...
There's nothing that we do because these animals can naturally carry these bacteria in their intestinal systems. And what can happen sometimes with them is we call them intermittent shedders, meaning that maybe on Monday my chicken is pooping out salmonella and maybe on Wednesday he's not. There's not a way for us to know. So the chickens don't get condemned or anything to that point. We really focus on education with the families that do have the chickens and the exposure to give them that education that Michaela talked about from CDC as far as how to own their chickens safely, how to keep their coops clean and well maintained, and how to prepare and collect those eggs and prepare those eggs safely for consumption.
So is the chickens destroyed then if you detect that?
No.
Okay.
No. The time I would know that they would maybe mandate that a chicken would be destroyed is if we had a flock with concern of avian influenza, which would be a novel influenza. And you've maybe seen in news articles in the past where there have been larger flocks in different cities and different countries that they have found avian influenza among the flocks, then they do typically destroy those chickens. But for salmonella and for Campylobacter or any of the enteric illnesses that we deal with, in general, that wouldn't be something. It's mainly just education on how to handle your chicken safely.
Great. Thank you.
Vice Chair Heyer, just earlier you asked how would people dispose, how would we dispose chickens if there's a complaint and there's our animal control will have to go and take them out. And today we got an email from IFA. I don't know if you had a chance to see it or not, but our IFA country store here. And they, in their email, they said that they can take chickens there anytime if anybody wants to dispose of chickens. Just so you know, on my notes, I wanted to mention that earlier.
All right.
All right, next, USU Extension Services, Dr. Frame.
Well, my name is David Frame. I'm a veterinarian and board certified in poultry pathology and in medicine. I have also served on task forces for avian influenza across the country, and also have been involved with the commercial poultry industry in California and in Utah for many years. I'm currently with Utah State University as their extension poultry specialist, and work at the diagnostic lab, Central Utah Veterinary Diagnostic Lab in Spanish Fork also as part of my assignment. And I just want to reiterate what Michaela and Amy have said concerning the chickens issues. Very good information. However, sometimes we get the idea that every chicken out there is a salmonella machine. And, there's other things that animals carry, and chickens particularly, besides salmonella, but that's definitely an issue. However, there's a lot of chickens out there that don't carry salmonella, and the ones that are at greatest risk are the ones that are the young. A chick, during the first 3 weeks, is very vulnerable to shedding salmonella. Now, when we talk about salmonella, it's not just, there's over 2,500 serotypes of salmonella. Only a few are found in chickens, and there's some specific ones that we have heard about in the news and so forth, but we don't have time to go into that big discussion. And even though I work for Utah State University, I'm not based in Logan. I'm based in Ephraim, and I apologize, but as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to have to get on the road so I can get home in time to get up and go to work tomorrow. What I'd like to do is just give you a quick rundown on Chicken 101 here. Chickens evoke a lot of emotions in people, and there's no doubt about it. Everyone has their own particular feeling about having chickens. Now, having said the salmonella situation, this is probably not the most conducive situation here. But chickens in residential areas, they're fairly inexpensive, but it just depends on the housing costs, on how much people want to invest in things. I'll show you a picture here of a coop that's an absolute designer coop that was made on just a shoestring budget. The lady of the house looked on the internet and decided that she wanted to make this thing, and she made it herself for $100 or less. But you can look on the internet and buy these enclosed coops for as much as $600. If you look at the total maintenance cost on one average hen, middle-sized hen or large hen, it's only about $25 per year. Chickens are non-intrusive if properly housed. They don't abide by property lines, obviously, and if your neighbor has tomatoes, they're going to go over there. But you want to properly house them, and if they do that, they're not much of a problem at all. They're harmless as far as biting people and things like that. I think that's why they're quite popular, and they're eco-friendly. They eat insects, and there's some natural fertilizers involved there. However, there are responsibilities that come with chicken raising, and some people have decided that they want to keep chickens as pets. They are different than dogs and cats. People have to realize that. They're not to be kept in the house, kept in the kitchen sink and so forth, or you're going to be able, or the health department's going to probably be hearing about it eventually. And I think it's very important that they have informed proper care and housing on how they take care of these things. Good management practices, good neighbors. You want to restrain these things, you want to restrict them. We've heard about rodent control today. I'm not going to reiterate that. Very, very important. That's probably the most important thing that you can deal with if you're raising poultry and chickens, is that rodents carry salmonella. They carry some other things too. And chickens can get salmonella from rodents, and then humans can get it from the chickens, or they can get it from the rodents too. Proper handling of the eggs, that was talked about, and then of course the poultry carcasses. People have to understand those things. Can they be kept? Of course, that's what we're discussing here. What are you going to do with sick, injured birds? Are they going to be allowed to be disposed of? I don't know what your regulations are, but is on-site burial approved? Is the community garbage approved? Those type of things. So you have to look at those ordinances as you're contemplating this. And then if there's any state laws regulating the processing of poultry or sale of eggs. And there are some that you'd want to talk to the Department of Ag about if folks are wanting to sell eggs to restaurants or any kind of a third-party deal like that. Again, the rooster issue is you don't need roosters to have eggs, obviously. And that's an issue you have to think about. However, I've raised, I was a real avid exhibition poultry raiser. Went to California showing our birds all over the state. In fact, I judge shows also. It's pretty hard to have exhibition poultry without roosters, but there may be some that request that. Containment's important, even if it's just a fence line. It's probably not the best for keeping things out, but you have to think of some biosecurity measures while keeping these birds. And here's that coop that I was talking about. I think it's just wonderful. I mean, this thing was made out of just scrap lumber and things that she found, and it's completely enclosed. It has a place there where you can gather eggs. You notice the big door on the bottom. That's to open up and be able to take the manure and litter out from underneath the perches of these things so that it can be disposed of properly and kept clean. And it's all contained, and so her chickens stay there. It's on caster wheels so that it can actually be moved around for different places. It's protected from dogs, cats, rodents, and things like that. So it can be done. Nest boxes are important. Nest cleanliness is extremely important as far as egg quality goes. And if the chickens are just allowed to run around and lay on the ground and so forth, you're going to have a much larger problem than having a place for these birds to nest, lay their eggs, and be gathered properly. An egg can age more in one day at room temperature than in 1 week in the refrigerator. And so eggs have to be gathered frequently. They have to, the people that are in this thing have to be invested in going out and gathering those eggs, getting them in the fridge, getting them in a safe place. Public egg sales, talk to the Department of Ag about that, if there are any. I don't think that's really within the sphere of what we're talking about tonight. But what do you do with your fowls? You know, you get these cute little chicks on Easter, and then they grow up and they lay a few eggs, and in a few years they get pretty old, and then they either die or they get to the point where they're not laying very well. What do you do with them? And that's an issue. What do you allow? What does a municipality allow for these birds? Very important that in your deliberations that you take into consideration these things. The place has to be inhospitable for pests. You will have an increased rodent varmint population with chickens that are not enclosed properly. And there are differences in how these things operate. Rodents or mice are a restrictive thing. They won't go more than about 30 feet. And so that's the owner's responsibility to take care of that. And even in the best of conditions, you have to have some sort of rodent control program. And if that's in part of the conditions and being able, when you go out and look at a coop, are they controlling those rodents in their yard? On the other hand, rats are a whole different ball game. Rats are a community problem, and they wander a long way, and so that becomes more than just an issue of a chicken owner on a situation like that. Make sure the litter is taken care of properly. It makes very good compost, and it's very good for the garden, and so you get that added benefit from raising the chickens. And then on the dead bird mortality, we talked about that earlier. So with that, that's about my presentation, and I wanted to leave enough time for questions so that if you had any before I leave.
Good.
Okay. A quick question for you, Doctor. Thank you for being here. A couple of things maybe unique, and I'm just doing this for my own education purposes, is wintering of chickens. I'll throw out my three questions for you. And then culling of chickens, you've talked about, disposing of the birds, but removing that ill bird out of the coop and then how often do you recommend that you move that coop, move it around, clean underneath it? Those three questions real fast.
Well, if it's a stabilized coop, what you want it with a floor on it, and that's what I would recommend. Then you should have a clean-out facility so you can get that litter out from underneath the perches and things like that. 75% of the droppings will be in the perch area if you have perches for the birds. certainly there's no set time on clean out, but a regular clean out. And that's like twice a month, something like that, where you're cleaning that type of litter out. I know some places that I've seen their rules, they require like a weekly clean out. That's almost overkill. It just doesn't need to be done that way. But the most important thing is what you do with that after you clean it out. You just don't leave it in piles, you know. You're just asking for fly problems and mice problems and everything like that. So you want to have a disposal plan of some sort. Get it in the garden, get it in the compost, do something with it. And your other two questions?
It's the winterizing, winter bird.
Oh, yeah. Chickens are remarkably very resilient during the wintertime. Wind is going to kill them. That's when you get the frozen combs and things like that. So if you can keep the wind chill down and things like that, you're in better shape. But generally speaking, you're not going to need a lot of additional heat sources or anything like that in the building unless you've got a huge coop and maybe one chicken in there or something like that. There is some body heat that's given out. People have more of a tendency to close coops up during the wintertime and then have problems that way with ammonia buildup because of moisture and things. And your middle one?
It was culling, just the sick birds. And
yeah.
I mean, I've studied this a little bit, and it says, some say every 2 years, some say 3 to 5 years. But as soon as you notice a bird is sick, that you try to get it out of that.
You do.
We only do 6 birds, for example, and you notice one that's, getting a little dull in color and stuff and activity. You want to try to hurry and get that bird out.
Yeah, then you have a plan. Have to have a plan on what you do with it at that point. Now, as far as education goes, Utah State University Extension, we do education for poultry. We do that. I should say I do that because I'm the only poultry person there. But what I do is I work with the county agents, and they are very responsive to this type of thing. And if there's a need for classes, for curriculum, Weber County would be more than happy to work with me and with you and anybody else on education situations.
Other questions?
Yeah, can you just talk a little bit more? You talked about the nesting eggs, and if they don't have a place to nest, then there's a problem or whatever. Can you just expand just a little on that?
Well, I want to reiterate the egg handling procedure that Michaela talked about, is that it's not a good practice to get these eggs wet and try to wash them. These eggs are permeable. The egg is the lung of the developing embryo. And so air gets through there, and so you can push things down in there and then get bacteria. And we're not just talking about Salmonella, we're talking about E. coli and other things in there too. So egg handling in a clean nest is imperative. And I don't want to hear that noise.
I'll turn it off.
No kidding. I don't either.
It's your turn, Luis.
It'll keep you awake for that drive home.
That's right.
Does that mean I can ask one more?
Yeah,
one question?
quickly.
Okay, turn it off.
I did.
Luis has one too.
Thank you, Doctor, for being here. The term you use is "if properly housed." It seems like a lot of the concerns that we've talked about tonight hinge on that question. Do you, besides education, besides zoning or our ordinance specificity, do you have any recommendations on how you can encourage properly housed? And the second part of the question is, do you have any experience in how many are properly housed versus are not?
Improperly housed birds are ones that are not protected from the elements. They're not protected from wild birds. They're not protected from rodents. And they basically are running loose. Chickens running loose are a danger in a number of respects. The neighbor's dogs, and then also the attraction of unwanted pests.
Okay. So I saw a lot of that when I was actually knocking on doors campaigning. Would see chickens running around. So I know it happens, but do you know to what extent it happens?
A lot. It happens. I don't see very many really properly housed coops, but I think a lot of it is education. The same thing with eggs. There's an increase in salmonella that's been reported in backyard chicken eggs, but is that because more people are raising backyard chickens, or are they just not treating them well? I think a lot of it is education. I think with education, that could be minimized.
Thanks. One final quick question. Do you know how much space per chicken do you need in a coop?
For that proper housing?
The basic is 2 square feet per adult bird.
Per feet?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a pretty standard.
What questions?
Time's up.
Doctor, thanks for
Thank you,
catching
Doctor.
these.
Great information. Be safe going home.
Yep, drive safe.
All right. And then last on our list is the Ogden Chicken Alliance and Gretchen Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Council, and thank you for this work session. My name is Gretchen Anderson, and I am a backyard chicken advocate. I'm also a native Utahn, born and raised in Salt Lake. I think when in the 70s we had chickens in Holiday, and we were the first backyard chicken keepers. Tonight I'm going to tell you all the wonderful parts about keeping chickens, and I'll look at both sides as well. Yes, you can have chickens with dogs, actually, and I've taught classes on that. I've taught classes to people who want to learn how to keep chickens, and I've taught classes on wintering hens as well, from both coasts of the United States and in between. I've also spoken at city council meetings from both coasts and in between as well. Back in 2009, I found out that people were fighting for the right to have chickens in their backyards, and it intrigued me as a reporter and a journalist. So I researched it and wrote a book on it, and it also has a quick start guide to keeping backyard chickens. Ogden is in that book. That was back in 2010 when I finished it. Backyard chickens took off in 2010 because our nation experienced the largest egg recall that it ever had. 550 million eggs were recalled across the country. Hundreds of people got sick because of salmonella poisoning. So that increased the interest in people wanting to keep backyard chickens. I worked with Farm and Garden CEO up in Idaho when I first published my book, and he actually thought the whole trend would fizzle out. Not so. In fact, the West is mostly chicken friendly, with many cities becoming less and less willing to put up ordinances that prohibit them. And then when you walk through the world's top retailer, Walmart, every spring, you will see chicken coops, you'll see hen scratch, you'll see chicken feed. The world's largest retailer is in the chicken business. Why do people keep chickens? One is natural pest control. You won't have a bug problem if you let your chickens free range for a few hours in your backyard in the evening. Nitrogen-rich fertilizer is another reason, and Dr. Dave talked about it as well. One hen is estimated to give you about 25 pounds of fertilizer a year. Okay, that's one hen, and I know you all are doing the math, I'm sure. But here's the deal. An average-sized dog will produce about 300 pounds of waste per year. You can't do anything with that, but you surely can do something with the chicken manure. Sustainability. Right now, our food mile, our American food mile from farm to fork is 1,500 miles. And so when you can walk out to your backyard and grab an egg and make breakfast, you're significantly reducing your food mile, your own personal food mile. Also, they're really entertaining. And then we do it for the egg production. You won't find these kinds of eggs in the market. All those colors. There are different breeds of chickens that lay different colored eggs. The shells are different colors. The eggs inside are all the same. Let's talk about the superfood of an egg. You all have heard that egg is on the superfood list. And a couple fun facts about eggs. An egg is the one animal protein that you and I as humans best digest. The one animal protein. Also, the egg is the protein by which all other proteins are measured. A couple fun facts. Mother Earth News, the magazine, did a study with Tufts University about 10 years ago. They took 4 samples from 4 different markets across the country from market eggs, and 4 samples from backyard chicken eggs across the country. So we're talking, comparing them. The cholesterol in the backyard chicken egg, 1/3 less cholesterol in the backyard chicken egg. Twice as many omega-3 fatty acids, 7 times more beta-carotene, off the chart, 1/3 more vitamin A, and 3 times more vitamin E in those backyard chicken eggs. According to the USDA, our federal government, the eggs that you get in the store are fresh 45 days after packaging. So it stands to consider, it makes us consider, what are we eating? What are we enjoying? I wanted to know how my backyard chicken eggs stood up to those eggs that you can buy in the market. Why don't you just buy organic, free-range eggs in the market, right? I mean, that's what they are. That's what I have in my backyard. So I went down to Albertsons, Idaho. We're home to Albertsons. That's where I'm from. And I parted with $5 for a dozen eggs, and it was cage-free organic. And I cracked open one of those cage-free organic eggs on one side and one of my eggs on the other side. And that's the difference. My egg is on the left. The cage-free organic egg that I paid so much for, I'm a thrifty chicken keeper, is on the right. And those eggs on the right didn't taste or look any different than eggs that we had been buying prior to getting chickens at Costco, 5 dozen at a time, right? You can buy them 5 dozen at a time at Costco. So I got to wonder what we've been fed, literally, in terms of marketing, cage-free organic. So where are people keeping chickens these days? In the big cities. Big time in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco, Phoenix, Atlanta, Seattle, Houston, where we're having all the flooding right now, and Portland. And then in my home state now, Twin Falls, Nampa, Caldwell, Boise, just to name a few. And here in Utah, they keep them in St. George, Brigham City, Provo, Moab, and, of course, Salt Lake City. A few years ago, Hugh Bartling's Green Urban Policy class from DePaul University out of Chicago did a survey, a nationwide survey on backyard chickens, and I really found this question interesting. Has the ordinance in your city been positive, negative, or neutral? And you can see 15 of the respondents said it's been positive, 6 neutral, 0 negative. There were a few that didn't answer, but of those responding, it was either positive or neutral. And Moab is in that list, as well as Boise, which is near where I'm from. So the other thing that we find interesting, when people want to have chickens in any municipality, whether it's a county or a city, and the county and city says you can't have chickens, there ensues the chicken fight, right? The backyard chicken fight. We have found that urban chicken keeping has affected local elections. And in fact, Salem, Oregon is one of them, a big brouhaha there for many years. And it saw people elected and not elected because of backyard chickens. And then Washington, D.C. just had a big squabble in terms of backyard chickens. And I will say Ithaca, New York, also. You've been talking about a rat issue and renting issue, and it made me think about my time in Ithaca, New York. And then there's Ogden right there. What will happen here? So why are some communities not keen on chickens? Well, noise is one issue, smell is the other, and of course health concerns is one. The noise is minimal because in most backyard chicken operations, roosters are cock-a-doodle don't. They just are unnecessary. And they do crow all day long. A lot of people say, well, why? And it's because they're marking their territory. Simply, they're saying, these are my hens, you stay away. That's why roosters crow all day long. The hens will cackle. They'll do the bark, 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 that sort of thing. I grew up with chickens, so I can talk with them.
That's better than the horn.
Thank you.
Better than the horn.
You'll crack a smile.
Okay.
You'll crack a smile out of us.
All right. And they usually do it when they lay an egg. They'll do it when they wander up to a nest box and they want to lay an egg and another hen is in her nest box. So you'll hear them talk at that time. But they're generally pretty quiet. Smell. 4 to 6 backyard hens don't smell. You asked Dr. Dave when to clean a coop. And because we would all have different numbers of chickens and different sizes of coops, my rule of thumb when I teach my classes is simple. You stick your head in the coop. If it smells worse inside the coop than it does outside of the coop, you clean it. That's easy. That's it. Just keep it clean. And I've found that most people who keep chickens are good stewards to their environment. Health of the chicken, health of the people around them. We have talked considerably about biosecurity. That's a big word for just washing your hands and making certain that you have dedicated footwear. And even I have a coop coat in the wintertime that I only wear out to the coop. I come in, hang it up. It doesn't go anywhere else in the house. So biosecurity is really important. And actually, it's been found that backyard chickens are healthier than factory farm chickens. And mainly it's because of overcrowding. And chickens who are in backyards are simply happier chickens. They get to run, they get to flap their wings, they get to peck at things that those chickens in the factory farms can't. So most often they are treated as pets. They are given names like Marcia, Jan, and Cindy.
That's too bad.
Just right? They are sometimes treated like the family cat or dog. As a matter of fact, the LA Times just had a big story 2 days ago about how the backyard chicken is becoming like a backyard dog to many, many people. And the great article said that 1% of the United States population keeps chickens now. And that number is supposed to increase by 400% by 2019, according to the USDA. So these sweet birds are usually manhandled by the youngest members of the family. Just make sure you wash their hands and everything else afterward. Simply put, the girls become part of the family. 100 years ago, our federal government told us to keep hens and raise chickens. It was that chicken in every pot. And now we find that so many of us have to fight for the right to keep chickens. In Weber County, there's a public opinion survey. You all have copies of it. And this is what we find most interesting. Locals are in favor of changing current policy that would allow chicken flocks in the backyards of Ogden, but to have restrictions. And I think that's fair, and I think it's right, and it makes sense. So, where will Ogden be? Amongst all those great cities, we hope Ogden is one of them as well.
Great, thank you.
I'm open to questions, and I made the time, okay?
Well, the rest of the Brady Bunch, do you have any questions?
You mentioned entertainment. Can you give us some facts about that?
Oh, well, you know what, Doug? They actually are very social, and they have their own little communities amongst each group of hens. So my husband and I have been known to sit out on the back patio and watch them. It's a slow day in Eagle, Idaho, but yeah, they're very entertaining.
What about tricks? Do they do tricks?
I have it on good authority that my sister-in-law can hypnotize a chicken.
Oh, really?
So,
Watch America's Got Talent and see the bird that played the piano.
Yes.
This is devolving. I'm going to ask a real question. You've got experience with ordinances across the country.
Yes.
You've worked with a lot of groups and a lot of communities. Do you have any real steps or real recommendations that encourage or incentivize compliance with ordinances? It seems that, to use the term again, if properly housed, if cleanliness is an issue, do you have recommendations on how you actually accomplish that instead of, attributing it just to education? Something very specific would be
Dr.
appreciated.
Dave said education, and I agree. And just say the word, and I'd love to come back and teach a class or two. But, Ben, you ask a good question. Let's give Boise City as an example. At one point, they had an ordinance that said you could have 3 chickens. And everybody I knew then had 3 chickens. They had all 3 of the same breed, and they'd only let 3 out at the same time. So you really didn't know, right? But now, because of some well-meaning people who wrote up an ordinance, we have an urban homesteading ordinance.
Wasn't bad.
We have no, it wasn't bad at all. Urban homesteading ordinance. And we don't have any registration or inspection. The chicken keeping community pretty much polices it itself. And I say that, and you say, okay, well, how is that done, Gretchen? We have an annual Eagle Boise Tour de Coop. And there are a lot of people who will ask to be part of it. And if there's a gnarly coop, it gets reported to code enforcement by our group. We feel so honored to be able to have 6 chickens now and bees in our backyard and a few other urban homesteading aspects that we want to make certain that it stays that way. And I would believe that the Ogden Chicken Alliance would be the same, that they would police their own situation. As far as code enforcement specifically, most people in your area probably don't register their dogs, right? So I don't know. I don't know how you would do it.
I think that's why you're asking.
Is there a registration fee for chickens in your area?
No, there is not. And in fact, in Eagle, where I live, there isn't even an ordinance. It used to be home to Merritt's egg farm, Eagle was. And so it's a real chicken place. They just let the homeowners associations handle it in Eagle. In Meridian, you can have 12 chickens. Caldwell and Nampa are about the same, and Boise is 6. And no registration fee.
And is that based on lot size, or is that based on?
Specifically, I can't remember on the lot size. But interesting with Ithaca, New York, they have 75% of the dwellings in Ithaca are rentals. I was blown away by that. And a very high student population living in those rentals. So they were very concerned that, students would get chickens, have them for a year, and then leave for the summer, right? And I think that that's a good consideration, a worthy consideration. They managed to figure it all out, and they passed an ordinance for chickens in Ithaca. They also have a rat problem there. And there are feeders that you can get for chickens, specifically for chickens, where you have the food inside, and as soon as the chicken steps down onto the feeder, it opens the food for them. The weight of a rat will not allow that. You have to be about a 3-pound chicken to do that. And if you have 3-pound rats, there's another issue that you better take care of, right?
Sole.
All right. Hey, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. So we're going to take a few-minute break. 5 minutes, you think? Is it enough for you guys to take a break? We hope that you will stick around, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes, stretch a little bit, and we'll be right back.
It's actually pretty hard to then get modified and then sent out.
I want to figure out a way to.
All right. Thank you for letting us have that break. I think it was probably good for everyone to get up and stand up and walk around. So welcome back. Looks like many of you stayed. I appreciate that. We are going to give about 45 minutes of public input on this issue, 3 minutes apiece. So what we'll have you do is come up and talk, and we're looking for new facts, if you, again, fact-finding. And I'm wondering if one of the things, and I'm not trying to dissuade you from coming up here, but I'm wondering if either by a show of hands, maybe because I see a lot of blue in the audience, thank you, that maybe just a show of hands to say if you are in support of having an ordinance might help some of us not have to come up so much. So do you guys want to do a support of hands of supporting an ordinance within our community? Nice, that's good. Wow, okay. Is there anyone against? All right. All right.
Maybe those against have been dissuaded.
There are opportunities to put up your position on comment cards as well, so if you don't feel comfortable speaking, you can use a comment card.
And are those going just in back, Brittany? Is that where they're going? Okay. They're in back, and you just leave them in back as well? All right, great.
I would hope those that are against would speak to us so that we can get their information also. It's just as important as those that are for the chicken ordinance.
Great. All right. Well, now that there's a lot of blue that have said yes, is there anyone in particular that would like to come up and talk?
Before we start, could we, just to avoid some of the coming and going, if you kind of get lined up in a queue a little bit, so that when the one person is done, the next person can come up quickly. That would be helpful today, too.
And then, yes, so you'll have to do your name and address.
Okay. Address or just name?
Name and address.
Name and address.
Just name.
Okay.
Thank you. Just your name, please.
Just my name. Okay. My name is Rebecca Green, and I'm kind of going to tackle the predator issue and also the pigeon issue. So I know you guys allow pigeons in the city. It's allowed. There's an ordinance. It's on the books. A person can have up to 100 pigeons, correct? Yes. Yes. Okay. So I'll start off. As a pigeon enthusiast who has raised and bred and showed well over 300 pigeons, I can tell you the difference between pigeon and chicken predators is there is no difference. Thanks to my son, we had every pigeon you could imagine. The entire family were members of the Colorado State Pigeon Association, and I was even the editor of their monthly newsletter. And not to toot my own horn, however, in an effort to validate my honesty and knowledge in the matter of pigeons versus chickens versus predators, I'm also a published artist with multiple covers on the National Pigeon Association, and I have some art hanging up in the largest known pigeon museum in Nuremberg, Germany. I have a couple samples here. I'm going to leave this with you guys to look at. But to get back to the issue, one time as our flyers, our racers were coming in, we had a young Cooper's hawk fly right into the coop behind him, into the loft. Killed one of my favorite red duns before I could even stop it. Our lofts attracted skunks, raccoons, snakes, fox, feral cats, and even the largest rat I've ever seen. We're talking about big rats? I mean, okay. So a good friend of ours and a mentor, he mentored us through this wonderful world of pigeons. He lost his entire flock in a loft to a raccoon one night. I mean, he probably had 150. I mean, that's how devastating they are. But, to say that you might put an ordinance on the books allowing, or might not, allowing chickens in Ogden with the excuse of they will attract predators. But you allow each and every household to have up to 100 pigeons. Makes no sense at all, considering wild animals are not any more attracted to chickens than they are pigeons, as we experienced that ourselves. And in reality, no said animal is going to bring any more predators. The fact is, they're already here.
All right.
And I want to make
Thank
one
you.
more point. Our pigeons, they flew all over and they pooped on neighbors' houses and pooped on neighbors' cars. My chickens never flew over the fence and pooped on my neighbor's car or house. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you. My name is Sebastian Benitez. I am coming here for my freedom, for my right. And I am so happy to see this presentation, and I am really grateful for every single one. Give some information to you guys to regulate in the future about the chicken. The police department, the code enforcement, the planning, I like that guy. The health department too, and the university guy. And I want to congratulate to the Ogden Chicken Alliance because she gave really good presentation and really concrete information. The rest, they have some information valid and some information is not valid because they don't have a concrete answer about the question. And I am here not necessarily to support the chicken. I am here to support the freedom and the right for our neighbors here in Ogden. Why I say that? Because when I move here, I come here for the freedom and for my right. And I don't want anybody take me away now. Put me restriction, put me rules, code, but don't take my right. And we have the right to do that. And don't use this. That is a plea for every single you guys. My request is don't take this because it's the election time. Take the decision because it's the right for our neighborhood, for our community. It's election time again. And that would be great if you decide for my right, for these people's right. I suggest to postpone the decision after the election to the people see how right you are. After November, please take the decision. That is my request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sandy Shoup, and I actually work for the Ogden IFA Country Store, so you maybe got my email. So I won't go over the same things that have been gone over many, many times here, but the one thing I want to tell you is I've worked at that store for 10 and a half years. When I started working there, we sold about 1,500 chicks. Last year, we sold 20,000. I promise you this is a big thing. Everybody wants backyard chickens. I hear it every single day that I work that the customers want chickens in Ogden. They ask me, I probably get more phone calls than you guys do or any of these other people do to want to know what the ordinances are, where everybody is. So we do want to accommodate everybody. We teach classes. We teach people when they come in and get their baby chicks what they need to do to keep their family safe. We teach them what coops. We sell the coops. We sell electric fencing to keep those chickens in their yards. We have everything that they need to take care of those backyard chickens and make it a good, happy experience for their families. But that is one thing that I want you guys to know is that your constituents want chickens. They maybe don't know how to get to you to get that, but people ask me every day, what can we do? And I say, talk to your council members because you guys are the ones that they vote in and they are coming to you for representation. So please remember that. These people maybe don't know how to get a hold of you or they're not sure how to go about this, but people do want chickens in their backyards. We do have, this has been asked quite a few times here tonight, what are you going to do if you have a chicken that you don't want anymore? We talk about culling, not just sick ones, but, every 3 years, usually it's time for them to get rid of chickens because they don't lay as well. So we have a policy in IFA. You can bring your roosters or your chickens, no questions asked. We have a stock tank in the store. We take those chickens. We don't care if you bought them from us or not. We will take those chickens, and we have a lot of farmers. We have people who use them for bug control. No questions asked. So there is not going to be a problem if somebody wants to get rid of a chicken. There's a place to go for it. We've done this successfully. Sometimes we'll have 5 or 10 in one day brought into our store. So this is working for us. So if you have concerns about where you're going to go with, what somebody's going to do with their chickens, we also, because we sell that many chickens and we sell the feed and we sell the waters and the coops, we do bring taxes into this city because of that. So there would be even more brought, if you guys allowed more people in Ogden to get them, we would actually, create more tax revenue for that. It's not just our store that sells chicks. There are other stores in the Ogden area that sell baby chicks, but we actually are getting chicks in again on Friday. So we do this in the spring and the fall. We have people waiting. We have people that come from all over Utah. We have Idaho, Wyoming that come to our store to get chicks from us because we sell so many. So anyway, if you guys ever have questions or you want us to help you with classes, I know there's been a lot of people say we do classes, but we already do classes. We'd be willing to work with you if you need help that way. So
fantastic. Thanks, Sandy.
Sandy?
Hi, my name's Amanda Carroll. Interestingly, I came tonight just to learn more about chickens because I'm not even sure if I want to own any. But one thing that I wanted to bring a little bit more attention to is it doesn't seem to me like there's the biggest difference between a pet and livestock is that livestock provides something more beyond just companionship. And it's interesting to me how many concerns, I think they're valid concerns. I think it's a good idea to have more information to address the concerns, but it's interesting to me that we talk and talk and talk about what are we going to do with the waste from a chicken, what are we going to do if the neighbors complain, but we don't ever try to disallow dogs or cats or pets. We've never had, as far as I know, a city try to ban dogs entirely. So it's interesting to me that there are so many problems presented with this where there are so many potential benefits where a dog or a cat really only provides companionship. I guess some do get rid of pests, so that's a side benefit. But if I were to ever own chickens, the biggest reason would be because of pest control, because we have an uncontrollable number of grasshoppers in our property. So I just wanted to kind of focus on that and make sure that that's something you guys discuss and consider as you make decisions. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Oh, please don't clap. That kind of goes against our civility rules.
Hi, good evening. Ladies and gentlemen in City Council, thank you very much for allowing us an opportunity to make comments.
You need to state your name, sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry. My name is Andrea Slaga, and one of the reasons I was really anxious to speak tonight is I wanted to represent a group that I don't know that I've heard from tonight. I'm part of the military community at Hill Air Force Base. So my husband and I have both served over 20 years. We arrived here in 2015 and started looking for a home. And our family and all the others like us, we moved to Utah, we're assigned to the base, but then we select the city that we're going to live in. We have jobs, we have income. In our case, we looked around, discovered that this is a great place, and bought a historic home here in Ogden, and are considering retiring here. And one of the things that I never asked about was the chickens. It didn't even occur to me that this would be an issue. And for me, it was really disappointing to find out because as military members, when we move around, we have little things that make a place home. So a garden, the chickens, or the same decorations, things like that make each new city part of who we are. I've lived all over the United States, Texas, Ohio, New Mexico, Washington, D.C., never had this as an issue before, so I didn't ask before I settled in Ogden. And when I found out that this was a rule, I went looking for why. So, I don't have to tell you all what the conversations are. There's a lot of information available on the web. And I wanted to say I absolutely agree with the city planner when he says you need to have balance and decide who you want to be as a city. So, some of the conversations about why chickens are bad in Ogden are really not reflective of a welcoming or inclusive community. And now that I am here, and I don't know, there's what, 20,000 people at the base, several hundred a year move in, and they call and you look for people you know and say, why did you live where you live? Why did you select the city that you did? And now I have to be honest with friends when they call and say, hey, where do you live? And I go over all the things that are great about Ogden, but this is something I do talk about because for the community that I come from the military community, this is really common, and it's something that, in my experience with my friends and the people that I know, it actually is important, and it is a factor in whether or not we choose to move into your community, buy homes, shop here, live here, make friends associations, go out and eat in the restaurants, and basically contribute. There's a lot of options in Davis and Weber County, so the question is who do you want Ogden to be?
Thanks, Andrea.
Hello, my name is Kerry Wayne, and after last week, I'm amazed to see that you can all speak, because when I was here, you weren't able to. My grandfather was a farmer. I helped clean out those chicken coops. When I moved here to Ogden, I had a property that was adjacent to me where they were raising nothing but roosters. And when I finally realized that they were doing nothing but cockfighting with them, I went ahead and contacted zoning and asked them to get rid of them, or animal control. At any rate, again, I think civility is the most important thing when you have an animal of any sort, be it a dog, cat, chicken, or whatever. It's the owner being responsible on it. And again, I think when Greg was talking about civility, that's one of the things I think I've been talking to you about for 4 years, is being a good neighbor and me not having to call you and come in here and beg you to be decent, okay? I just want you to know I'm going to be out in your districts, your wards, and I'm going to be talking to your voters. They're going to wonder why it is I'm passing out handouts for them.
Is this about the chickens, or is this more about that?
It's responsibility of government. It's someone being responsible to the voters.
This is a fact-finding session regarding chickens, so if you have more about the chickens, that would be great.
Okay. I expect you to take care of the chickens, okay? I expect you also to take care of all the other wildlife as well. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you for being here and listening. My name is Ty Reeder. I did not plan to get up and speak. I didn't know that that was something that you could do. I don't like to be in front of people, but this is something that is very important to me. I didn't ever aspire to be a chicken owner or someone who wanted to be sustainable with animals. But my husband and I moved to Kentucky 7 years ago, and after seeing how well people could house chickens in their backyards that were not out in the country but were in neighborhoods, I thought, hey, maybe we could do this. So we did, and just like many friends of ours out there, we did it successfully, and if we kept up our coops, we never had any problems with rodents or any of the problems that have been talked about here. And then he got a job offer in January to come here, and we're from Utah, and we knew many people here already who own chickens throughout Utah, and had great experiences, and my sister has been able to keep up her chickens well and has them enclosed, and none of these issues have been a problem for anybody that I've met who loves chickens. And so we were really surprised that Ogden didn't allow chickens. We decided to look at Ogden because the housing prices have gone up so much everywhere else in Utah that we wanted to live. My husband works in Salt Lake City, and this has to do with chickens a little bit. Our house would have been $100,000 more anywhere but Ogden. So the housing prices is what brought us here, and it's an up-and-coming city, and we're really happy to be here. We think it's a great place. But we were very concerned that we couldn't have chickens. It was almost a deal breaker. We almost stayed with family for a couple more years so that we could live somewhere we could have chickens. It was that big of a deal to me. We almost looked at places in Clearfield, but he didn't want to commute that far. In Kentucky, we were considering getting a farm, but when we decided to come here, we were like, well, that's out, but let's have chickens. And we decided to settle in Ogden, like I said. But I looked on Ogden's city website, and it says Ogden, still untamed. And I was like, wait a second, no chickens, but they say they're untamed. And I think it's a great slogan that inspires me to work to have chickens legally here, because our family will always be in support of that. And following the law, we're not going to get them unless it's legal. It's a right, I think, to be sustainable like that comes with responsibility. And we would take that seriously. So.
All right, thank you for your comment.
Love it.
Good reference to
Good
still
point.
untamed.
Unless you want to have chickens.
Well played, yeah.
Hi, I'm Liz Christensen with the Ogden Chicken Alliance. I do want to pass these out because I'm going to speak on these.
Help you.
So I don't know if all of you are aware of this, but a year ago we had a meeting, and it was included with the Deputy Director of the City Council, the City Planner, and the City Attorney. The memo that you're seeing right now is a result of that meeting. I don't know whether you all got a copy of that a year ago. First, I want to mention that we spent months collecting data for a survey that was created by Weber State. The survey specifically addressed backyard chickens in Ogden, and all of you city councils were given the results, I believe. As you know, the results were overwhelmingly in favor of backyard chickens with restrictions. Interestingly, City Council put a similar poll on their Facebook page last week, and in just 3 days of circulation, the poll reflected the exact same percentages. The people of Ogden are overwhelmingly in favor of the freedom of choice when it comes to deciding to keep a few egg-laying hens on their property for food for their families. I also want to remind everyone that anything said about disease usually applies to crowded conditions such as factory farms or having 100 hobby pigeons in a backyard loft. Ogden City Code 151319 currently allows 100 pigeons in the yards of Ogden, and those pigeons can carry diseases that chickens are accused of carrying, plus more, Newfoundland. And they fly hundreds of miles and hundreds of miles back, bringing those diseases. A few well-maintained egg-laying hens are less likely of a threat than 100 pigeons. So why have pigeons been readily accepted while backyard chickens are continually discriminated against? And I'm just wondering, when you allowed pigeons, did they have to go through a similar form that we're going through? Or was that just put on the code that it's okay to have pigeons? So that I don't know. On your memo, you'll also, on the page 2, the reasonable conclusion of our attorney, the Ogden Chicken Alliance feels that now is the time to pass a city ordinance that allows those living in single-family zoning areas to keep backyard chickens. There are a number of surrounding cities and communities that we can look to as successful examples of how to allow Ogden citizens to take more control over the food source and improve their families' lives. We look forward to working with the city to ensure that this is accomplished in a reasonable, fair manner that respects the rights and privileges of us all. So I have a couple minutes. So this third page that you'll see were emails that John sent to surrounding cities, and he got responses from the mayors and the city council members from those surrounding cities. And it kind of backs up what our Gretchen Anderson went over with neutral, positive, and negative. All right? And that last page is from the IFA, Sandy. And I think that she sent you an email of that last page. It's just a copy. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Liz.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Kelly Freeze, and I was listening to the other speakers, and I was listening with an open mind. I do want chickens. I heard what they were saying. I heard the animal control officers saying they want to be proactive. Let's be proactive. Let's come up with a policy that works for everyone, where we can work together. Chickens aren't going to go away. I'm looking at the next generation of people growing up, and they are stronger, leaning towards creating this life for themselves and leaving a smaller footprint and just having their own gardens and their own environments and stuff like that. So let's be proactive and put something out there that works for everyone, something that we can get grounded before this next swell of chicken people come at you, you know? And the people here are law-abiding citizens. We want this to work. We want to have ordinances that have restrictions and limitations for us. I'm afraid that down the road you're going to have people that don't, that are willing to, you know, we've had some brave people come forward that already have chickens in their yards because they want to make it legal. They want to do it right. But there are going to be a lot of people that don't care down the road, and that's going to put a bigger strain on our city resources to monitor those people than it would be if we had an ordinance in place and we're able to train these people and help us all to have a really good experience with our chickens. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Pardon?
I said thank you.
My name is Dan Gull. First of all, I just want to thank all of you council members and mayor for creating this forum, creating an opportunity for us to discuss these issues in a civil manner, in a way that we can understand the pros and cons. We know that these are important issues, and there's always going to be pros and cons, and I think we need to weigh those out. You said you were asking for new information, and so I wanted to provide a perspective on maybe some information that's not always considered. I believe, you know, I represent a law-abiding citizen of Ogden. I would love to have chickens, but I don't currently have chickens. So I would say it might be unfair to judge the city the way things are right now, because I believe there are a lot of other city residents who are in a situation similar to me. We want to obey the law. We want to have clear guidelines. We want to be able to reasonably have chickens in a way that can be, we can teach principles to our children. You know, I've been a resident of Ogden for 18 years. I believe there's a lot of things that can be taught to our children and our families about responsibility and about sustainability, things and values we want to instill. Our pioneer ancestors came here because they wanted to have a place where they could, you know, establish a life where they could represent those same principles of sustainability, of self-mastery, of self-reliance. Those are principles that mean a lot to us and to our community. And I think so what I would say is I believe there are a lot who would if we made clear definitions. And again, we don't have to do this by, you know, saying, oh, we're starting from scratch. No, we've got a lot of other cities and municipalities around us who have tackled these issues, who have gone back and forth. I believe we can draw on a lot of those resources and information from them and ask those important questions. What's reasonable? What can we do to, you know, and again, I would hate for us to assume that there's this citizen out there who is just looking to break the law or is looking to, you know, just do whatever. I believe most citizens are very respectful of the law. They want to have clear guidelines. They want to be able to know what they can do so they can reasonably do things and enjoy some freedoms, but also be able to do it in a way that's, according to the law, is respectful of their neighbors and allows them to enjoy some of those things. And so, again, I would just ask you to consider what can we do to be reasonable about this? What can we do to make it so that it can work for everyone and so that it can be something that is valuable to our citizens, to our community? So again, thank you. I know it's not an easy decision. I know there's a lot of information, but again, I just want to thank you for taking the time and the effort to put forth and bring this issue forward. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, only one per household. I'm just kidding.
Hello, my name's John Christensen. I'm with Ogden Chicken Alliance. And what I'd like to share with you today is why are there laws regulating backyard chickens? Early in the 20th century, chickens were common across America. Chickens were easily raised and did not take up much space. A small flock of backyard chickens supplied the family with eggs and meat for little cost. Backyard chickens weren't just permitted in those days, they were encouraged, as reflected at that 1918 ad from the government. So what happened? By the middle of the 20th century, food production had become industrialized, ensuring a ready supply of inexpensive poultry and eggs in the grocery stores. With a car in the driveway and a refrigerator in the house, it was easy for people to transport meat and eggs home from the supermarket. People no longer needed to keep chickens and to feed their families. At the same time, with the following World War II, the modern cities were born. modern cities were born, wanted to be seen as cosmopolitans, as a desirable place to live. So a ban against farm animals was one way such cities wanted to distance themselves from the unrefined rural roots that they came from. Today, with our food source being tainted with chemicals from the factory farms and the inhumane treatment of animals, we have seen our food source being recalled from apples to zucchini all the time. Today, with the food movement is adapting a simpler and more substantial way of life today. Backyard chickens are one way. Cities across America are changing their ordinances. I have copies here. That one there is from Newsweek magazine. It interviewed or it done a poll of 100 cities with the largest population over 100,000. Back in 2010, there was 65% of them allowed backyard chickens. And a survey done again from Montana Group a couple years later showed that it jumped up to 93%. 100 largest cities in America now allow backyard chickens. So we, the citizens of Ogden, are responding to requesting the city council to hear our needs of the citizens of Ogden to allow backyard chickens. And we have an ordinance here, just a rough draft we'd like to see. You guys see? I think it's fair on both parts. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
John? Oh,
I'm sorry.
Quick timing.
Wasn't fast.
was.
Hi, my name's Amy Gull, and I came here initially kind of feeling like, sure, we could do chickens in Ogden, but then as I heard everybody's presentations, I kind of started feeling maybe it's not a good idea. And so I kind of feel concerned about the manpower and the cost, and I haven't been to the budget meeting, so I don't know how this money is going to come out of the budget to get the extra officer to go and enforce the fines and things like that. So I'm kind of concerned about that, and also just the citizens who could be having conflict with their neighbors because their chickens are not doing what they're supposed to or getting out of their fences and things, so I'm a little bit worried about that. However, I am in favor of having the Chicken Alliance and all that to pass if there are some very clear guidelines, and again, education. I kind of felt also persuaded with that side that if we had just enough regulations to make it so that people could have chickens, and yet it could also be so it would be enforced properly and financially be feasible as well. And I probably should support chickens because my husband likes to eat 3 eggs a day. So we should get our own chickens at home. Would be great. So as long as there's some really clear guidelines, then I would be in favor of it. But just really can make it very clear and education so that it can be successful.
Thank you, Amy.
Amy?
Does she call you Gaston, Dan?
Hi, my name is Holly Trimble, and I do not have chickens, nor have I ever, but when I was looking into having chickens, when I found out that we couldn't, I was disappointed to see that. But what I wanted to point out is it seems like there's been a lot of the perspective that if I have chickens, it's good for me, but it's inconvenient to my neighbors. But I think it's really important to remember that if somebody has backyard chickens in your community, it's good for your whole community. If people are traveling less, decreasing that food mile to get their food and are more sustainable with the way that they eat, they're using less fertilizer in their garden because they have that free fertilizer available. Maybe they're using less pesticides because their chickens are eating their bugs. All of those things are good for our community as a whole, not just the person that has the chickens. So if my neighbor had chickens, I think that'd be great. Plus, they'd probably have extra eggs to hand out, which would be awesome too. But I just think that's important to remember. It's not just an inconvenience to your community. There's a lot of things that better the community just by you being more sustainable. Thank you. And thank you guys for holding this meeting.
Thank you.
Hopefully you live close to Dan, apparently.
My name is Gail Allen. I did not plan on speaking this evening. I feel very uncomfortable talking in public places, but just a couple comments. One on Greg Montgomery's pointing out the change in the size of lots in the city now, and I understand the concern that has, because we do have smaller lots, but I've noted that it doesn't make any difference when it comes to dogs. They can bark 24 hours a day, and that's disturbing, but that's okay. So the prejudice against chickens, I don't quite understand that, because the chicken has more value than the amount of manure that the dog will create. So I would like you to consider chickens on the same level that we do dogs and give them an equal chance. And if we have an ordinance, then that can be controlled in a reasonable way, the same that dogs are. There's laws and conditions that dog owners have to abide by, so why can't this be applicable to chickens? I guess that's pretty well the comment that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail.
Thank you.
My name's Bucky Cash. I've lived in a couple different homes in Ogden, and in both of those homes, I have had critters. I've had raccoons in my apricot tree, and I've had raccoons kill my contraband. That goes to your point, Mr. Nadolski. Sorry, I don't do well doing at this, but
Doing fine.
chickens that aren't kept well don't make it in Ogden. I mean, if you don't have a good coop, if you're not taking care of your birds, they're simply not going to make it. And I've talked to people who have had backyard chickens who got right out of the backyard chicken business because they felt like they were in over their heads and they knew it. And those people, I mean, their birds don't live. That's frankly, I mean, because I care a lot about my birds, and they still get killed sometimes. So the other thing that I wanted to say is eluding me now. So it was going to be good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can write it down on a piece of paper and.
Yeah, if you remember it, yeah.
You're not resetting the clock, are you? I'm just waiting. I still have time.
Yes, because that thing will go off.
Hi, my name is Moroni Rue. You know, I kind of live by a few principles. I consider myself a principled person, and one of the main principles I like to live by is the principle of property rights. We live in a nation where we believe we have certain rights, and I believe property is one of those. And the next principle I like to live by is the principle of what's called anything that's peaceful. You know, we talk about rights, but that doesn't mean you can go out and slug your neighbor or do all sorts of things. You still need to be civil. We need to be peaceful. You know, so for me, this isn't necessarily a conversation of should we have chickens. It should be how can we accommodate each other to make sure that we are being peaceful with each other. You know, the whole issue, can or can we not, I don't think that should even be on the table. Again, it should be, as many people have mentioned, how many chickens can we have? How can we properly house them? I think that's where the conversation should be at. Again, I know a lot of people who don't want to break the law, but they do it because they want to be self-reliant. They have their own reasons, but I think that's a big part of it. They want self-reliance and the health benefits as well. So I hope that we can kind of consider those things as we go forward. I think that would definitely make everyone happy. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Seriously, we have 9 more minutes.
That doesn't mean we have to take the 9.
You have 3 minutes, whether you are quick or not.
Carla Strebel, and I would just like to say, unlike the neighbor's dogs, chickens are quiet at night.
That was quick.
I don't know. What is it? Can you repeat that? No, I'm serious. I didn't catch it. No, seriously, sorry.
Well, I lost my voice a little bit.
No.
So, unlike your neighbor's dogs, chickens are quiet at night.
Oh, got it.
They don't make any noise.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Garcia. I live here in Ogden. I want to say thanks to all of you for
this time, for everyone for attending. I had no intention of getting up and saying anything, but it's been quite entertaining tonight. So I also am in the military, a different perspective. I'm actually Utah National Guard full-time member. So every day I get up, put on the uniform for the state of Utah. Love the state of Utah. Love it here. It's great. I never in my life wanted to live here until I married a woman who lived in Utah. Now I'm here. My children, a couple of my children, didn't live with me until this last year. And I've got a son who loves chickens. Loves chickens. That's his pet. He came here and he said, let's get chickens. I said, well, let's look into chickens, see what we can do. Scoured the Ogden city ordinances. They're not in with livestock. They're not in with pets. They're in safety of all places. Chickens are in safety. They're not a safety issue. They're birds. They're not any different than what's flying around we have now. They're less of a nuisance than magpies are, and you can't do anything about those either. So we went through this whole process, and he found out he can't have chickens. He suffers from levels of depression, attributes of spectrum disorders, and he has a hard time coping with people, different situations. Brilliant, but chickens are kind of his outlet. He really has a passion for chickens. They're his pet. They're what drives him. And he's even got apps on his computer, chicken games. It's ridiculous sometimes. But the ability to have chickens, it seems like a fundamental right of people to sustain yourself. There shouldn't be limitations on your ability to provide for your family in a safe way. I don't understand why it's even an issue in the city. I really don't. I don't have much more else to say. I do appreciate all of you and your time and allowing the people to present their thoughts and ideas tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you for protecting us.
Any day.
All right.
I love it. It's what I do.
Chair White, when we don't have more speakers, are we having a little bit of a time to voice opinions here?
We are.
May I take the floor?
Let me just make sure there's no other public input.
Last chance.
Councilmember Lopez is going to speak.
That's right. And he gets more than 3 minutes.
So, yeah.
No, he doesn't.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow. 3 minutes in English, 3 minutes in Spanish. Okay.
Only one per family.
So I just want to say very quickly that I'm really, really thankful to all of you that came here tonight. I'm very thankful and grateful to the hard work that you've done to get to this point. Sometimes these discussions get heated. I've heard that sometimes there are complaints of lack of civility around these conversations. And you have done an amazing job at keeping these respectful and civil. And I really appreciate that and thank you greatly. You've done a lot of work to do this grassroots movement. Okay? I think our country, our community, needs people like you for our democracy, for the sake of our democracy. We need the involvement of citizens to make us accountable to you. Okay? We have, I am very against this clapping rule that we have. Okay, we have presenters that come here, and we just had a presenter in our workroom next door that presented for an hour, and there was a lot of clapping going on for this guy. I don't know why we don't allow the people to express themselves. It can also happen with civility. It can also happen with respect. There's clapping in Congress that happens when there's State of the Union addresses and whatnot. So I'm against that silly rule here that we have. No, please don't, no. Don't get me in trouble, please. We can clap outside. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 informational tools. You can call them service if you want right now. Weber State University, with the help of Chicken Alliance, did a door-to-door survey. There was a Weber State University online. And by the way, thank you, Azanet, for all your work and the work of your students that put their heart and soul into helping with this. We had a council website, we had a Facebook poll from our council, and then we had council correspondence, emails, and messages. And all of them came very close to being the same results. 90-10, 93-7, 90-10, 89-10, 85-11, all in favor of these. Okay? So, now, I have time limits? Really? How's that? How does that work? Huh?
You got 30 seconds, go.
Keep going, you're fine.
They're teasing me. Now I'm going to speak for another 10 minutes.
It is a work session.
So I just wanted to point these out, okay? I haven't seen any other tool out there that shows us that this data is the opposite. If someone has it, please show it to us. Let me see it, please. When I ran for office, people were asking me about chickens. Okay, we know that it's a political issue and that it's an election issue. And I didn't know at the time what to say because I didn't know anything about chickens. And I made a promise. I said, I don't know and I can't take a position right now because I don't know. But if I win, I said, I promise that I will come back and speak to you. I will learn about the issue and I will make a decision. Okay? And that's what I did. Okay? That's what I did. And I'm the same person. This job hasn't changed me. I'm the same person that I was when I was elected almost 2 years ago, and I don't intend to change. And if I'm up here and there's ever a time when I don't feel that I can represent my constituents respectfully and to the full of my capabilities, then I feel that I don't have business being up here. That's me. I'm speaking for me. Right? Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here.
Chair White, can I just make a couple really fast?
I don't know, he's got the timer.
I don't have the timer. So again, I want to thank all of those who presented tonight. We didn't hear a lot of those who may be against chickens. Personally, Mrs. Gull, thank you for just coming up. I know you personally. I walk by your house quite often and appreciate you, both of you, coming up. And then I want to thank John. John, you've been here when there's only one person in the audience, and that's you. And so you've done a lot of hard work. You've educated us. And personally, I want to thank you, and thank you for the information you've always presented to us.
And he has been here when it's been very long.
Yes, he
nights.
has, and just waited. And those in the audience, thank you for participating. Thank you for being here. Some of us may have a view, pro or against, or against chickens, but I want to thank you for allowing us to have that opinion. Some of us have researched it and come up with our own reasons, and I hope you respect that. I hope you respect that even of your neighbors, who may say to you, be a good neighbor, and that's what we should do. I see some heads nodding no, but still be a good neighbor and be civil. Many of you have said that. Kelly, you said, I want a policy that works for everyone. We may not have a policy that works for everyone, but it's back to where we may have a balance. We may try to have something that works, and that won't please everyone. There will be some people who will be against it either way, no matter what we choose. There will be some people who will be against whatever we choose. I think we had a good representation that we've never had before. We've never had Utah State University come and speak to us. We've never had Weber County Health Department. We've had information from them, but we've never had them personally come and present. And so I think it's been a good night. And I have many friends in the audience that are medical professionals too, and I just want to thank you for being here. Thanks.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
just 2 or 3 minutes, and you can put that on the. I'd like to thank our staff, the council staff that put this together, in order for us to get the information that's necessary. And I would like to also, like Neil mentioned, Liz and John Christensen, the element that we're talking about this evening is that they presented the program that was different when it was presented the first time. The climate has changed in that aspect there. We need to get an ordinance that will benefit Ogden and the citizens. We need to get a benefit that we can regulate and that we can enforce. We need to have something that will say, that will clear the language that we have in our animals ordinance. And maybe what we start out with will have, at the end, will have some similarities, but there may be some changes along that line so that we can put this into our ordinances and look at it as a unified piece of ordinance for the city. The important thing is that we had this discussion this evening. We had 6 presenters. I've never been seen an issue come before the council where we had this much information. I'm proud to be on a council that wants to make the right decision, that wants to listen to the citizens of Ogden and provide the element that will benefit them. I'm proud of this council. I'm proud to be a member of that council, that we took the time this evening to do that. And I'm proud of my fellow council members for doing that. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Thank you for sharing your ideas and suggestions. And I've got a lot of information, so when we start formulating this ordinance, that information I'll look at very, very honestly and have an open mind. I want an ordinance that will be beneficial to Ogden and the citizens of Ogden, and that's the element. And if it means that we will have chickens, then we have to have that element that we can actually regulate and enforce and make it compatible to the citizens of Ogden. And I think that's the key element that we're looking at here. Thank you. Okay, I'm all done. Well, thanks again.
Sorry. You can finish.
Chair White, if I may.
Well, you only have 15 seconds.
Doug took your time.
That's all right. No filibuster from me. So, I just want to say how thankful and proud I am of all of us tonight. It's already been said, but this topic does have a way of cutting kind of deep with some folks, good and bad. And when we first, at least when I first started here, we all made a really conscious effort. We wanted it to be a more approachable council. But I've realized over time that we can't be approachable without help from our community too. And tonight has proven that we can have difficult conversations without being personal. And I want to thank you all for that. I think it is a bigger testament than we're probably giving ourselves credit for. But Ogden's making a lot of progress, and I think that we can make even more progress when we don't politicize issues. We are able to set aside the emotions and talk about the facts to weigh important information so we can make important decisions and make the right decisions. So I just want to lend my voice to the appreciation for the civility tonight. and to congratulate you and to thank you for helping us make this chambers more reflective of the people who live here and the people who serve here, because I think we all love being here. I also want to thank everybody who presented, who's done a lot of homework, who have brought the facts to the table. I still need some additional facts on my decision-making side, but I have no doubt after tonight that I'm going to get the information I need to make a good decision, a decision that I think will help me sleep very well at night. So, thank you.
I promise I'll be brief. I'd like to thank, all those people that came tonight.
Sorry.
That horn's broken.
We're in a stand-up guild.
Most of all, John, like has been mentioned, you've come, I don't know how long it's been, but a long time, and you've rallied quite a group, and I truly commend you for your efforts and the way that you handled it. You've always been very civil and very approachable, and I appreciate that. We've had other topics that have come through this council, and people have taken a much different approach, and I have nothing but respect for the way that you've handled this. So thank you, and to the Chicken Alliance for the way that you approached us, the way that you disseminated the information to us, and the way that you allowed us to learn more and to be part of this process. So thank you. I heard a lot of things tonight. Some of the things that I'm going to take away from tonight, or that I'm proud of, is that all of you choose to live here, which really makes me happy. It means we're doing something well, and I'm proud of the direction that the city's going and the decisions that we've made. And I thank you for choosing to live here. We need you, and I appreciate you living here. I agree that there are always going to come issues that people are going to want in their city, or to be allowed or not allowed, and I appreciate that this was a format that we use to gather that information and to hear both sides. Well, to hear sides, but I appreciate this process and again the civility in which you all did that. So thank you. I'd like to thank the administration. It sounds like people enjoy living here. People are proud of the city and the services that we provide. So thank you for all the things that you do for us and for our residents. And we try to do as much as we can with the limited resources that we have. So it's always a balancing act, and I appreciate everyone's effort in this. I'm thankful for our staff and for the administration and for the Chicken Alliance and for everyone that's brought information forward. It's been very beneficial, and I just want to say thank you.
I'll be brief too. I'm done.
All right. So a lot has been said, obviously, but I want to just, I know that there's some frustration, there has been some frustration about time and why can't this go faster, and, you know, why can't you just make a decision? Well, obviously, after hearing all of the things tonight, there's a lot of things that go into making a decision. And I just want to say that allowing us to hear the presenters tonight and allowing us to hear your comments really does help. And so I know that it seems like, why isn't it going any faster? Well, it's because we need to do things in an order and in a process. And so I appreciate you letting us take the time to organize this event or this work session, and allowing us to hear the speakers that came in. With that, though, our next steps, and I just want to kind of go over a few of the next steps. There was a lot to digest tonight. I think there was different things. I know that, John, you handed out a draft ordinance, and so I think there's some things that for us to digest. So we'll probably take a week. I know that that's time again, but we'll take a week and discuss it again at our work session next week, I think, or the following week. Is that correct? Next week. So we're gonna talk about what our next steps are next week at our work session, so that we can move this along now that we have more of a base under us. So that's what our next steps are. Any comments to that, or any concerns about what you want to see happen? Is that?
What about the Planning Commission? Where do they fit into this?
I don't think we have, I mean, so we don't have an ordinance in front of us, so it would have to, you know, we'll either have to have someone petition to get an ordinance through through the Planning Commission, or we'll have to bring one forward, so.
And just, in the past, we have discussed some different options about moving that forward or how to move forward with that, and maybe after next week, when we discuss kind of moving forward from there, maybe we can put that, some council or some options related to the chickens and moving forward, or next steps. Maybe we can post that on the website. Obviously, you all are very familiar with our website, so we can go ahead and maybe try that.
583 people at least.
But yeah, I don't think tonight we can lay those out right now.
But it's reasonable to believe that next week, by the end of our work session meeting, we can have an idea of the direction that this will go.
Or a good step in.
And Chicken Alliance already is aware that if they petitioned, that would shorten the time. If they just went down tomorrow and petitioned, it would be in that process and move forward. I think this is still less than 18 days from September's meeting, but it would be October's meeting before I think the Planning Commission would review that. But that is something that is open to them. And I think there has been some talk of that, if I've seen your website correctly or your Facebook page, that you may do that. So.
Yeah, we're going to do it last week, and we're going to wait till after this meeting.
So that's something that's available to you.
I think it's important for us to review those options that Bart Blair's outlined for us, and that'll be an important discussion for us to look at those options and go through those scenarios.
I think that's what our plan is for next work session.
I will, just a quick question, Vice Chair Heyer. How will the Ogden Chicken Alliance filing the petition would expedite it as opposed to us?
It would take any time that we're going to discuss it out of that equation.
Got it. Fair enough. Well said.
Okay.
Permission to clap? I mean,
adjourn. You ready for a motion to adjourn?
No, I was going to just see if there's anything that the mayor would like to comment on.
Sure. I just add my voice to the chorus of gratitude for everybody coming and being willing to engage in the civility that was here. It's interesting, when I was first elected, I had a number of people ask me, what's the most surprising thing about your first 6-8 months in office? And we spent 6 months pouring over almost a $200 million budget. It was the priority of everything that we did. We came, we presented it to the council. There were 2 people in the audience when we presented this $200 million budget, and they both wanted to talk about chickens at the end of it. So we've understood for a long time that this is an emotional issue for a lot of people. The priorities, I thought, was something that took me a little while to figure out, but the ability to talk and have dialogue is really important, and it matters. It really does matter, so we appreciate that. I'd also like to thank Chief Young, Jared Johnson, and Greg Montgomery. You guys have worked really hard on understanding the issues. Appreciated your presentations. There's been a big lift on your end as well. So we appreciate your being willing to talk to people and do all the research that you've done, and appreciated your presentations tonight. And again, you guys have all been here for 3.5 hours. Some of you have been at this for months and months and months. Devil's in the details a little bit. We do want to have a balanced approach as we go, take these things into the public. It can have a lot of unintended consequences if you don't measure it well. And so this is one of those circumstances where I think we all collectively want to measure twice and then cut once, as they say in carpentry. carpentry. So appreciate your feedback. It does help us make much better decisions, and we appreciate the dialogue. So thank you very much.
I'm sorry,
We can just leave.
Yeah, I know. All right. We don't need a motion to end the work session, apparently.
we're done.
So we're done. Thank you.
Great night.